meaningful conversations that lead to deeper appreciation of the richness and complexity of the human experience. Today, we're going to explore how art and also our teaching practices play a crucial role in helping us understand diverse perspectives. We'll discuss how art helps us connect with the thoughts and the emotions of individuals from different backgrounds and how we might challenge our own preconceptions. So our goals for today is that we're going to recognize the strength of using object-based teaching as curriculum topics and skills. We'll hopefully leave by feeling more confident in applying object-based teaching in our practice. We'll develop and share culturally responsive pedagogy of engaged learning. And when you leave today, you'll leave with additional tools and resources that are needed to engage students and center the learner. It's really my great pleasure to welcome several presenters and facilitators today. I'm going to be brief with their introductions because you have copies of them online when you register and in your packets, but we're really delighted that Heather Corvilla and Amy Filer-Wunder are both here this morning. Amy is a professor of art education at Kutztown University and is the coordinator of the Masters of Art Education graduate program. Heather Corvilla is a museum professional who teaches in the area of arts administration and in the master's programs at Kutztown University and the University of Kentucky. Our lunch discussion will be facilitated by LaToya Council, and LaToya is an assistant professor of sociology and Africana studies here at LUAG, and the author of 2 recently published children's books, which is fantastic. Yes. And then in the afternoon, we'll have a session facilitated by Flavia Zuniga-West. And Flavia is the founder of the Adding Voices Conference and visual arts teacher at Harvard-Westlake School. Finally, we're very grateful to the Pennsylvania Art Education Association, as well as the National Endowment for the Arts for their support of today's event. I am also personally very grateful to Stacy Brennan, our Curator of Education, and Elise Schaefer, our coordinator of Museum Experience and Access, for all of the hard work that they've put in today. Just a few housekeeping things that I'd like to mention. We hope that you all make yourselves comfortable throughout the day. There is a restroom available on this floor, just around the corner to the left down the hallway. There's additional restrooms upstairs on the first floor, as well as the floors above in Zollner Art Center. There's an elevator that can be accessed through this hallway. Just be careful of the cord here on the floor. And we also want to mention that as we share ideas and ask questions, we can pass the microphone, but also if you choose, just please speak at a moderate pace with your educator, amplified voice so that everyone can hear what you're saying. There's also a tip sheet inside your folder of other kind of ways to make yourselves at home and comfortable here, and items related to accessibility, so feel free to read that at your leisure. And so with that, again, welcome, enjoy the day. We're delighted that you're here at Lehigh University Art Galleries, and we'll get the day started with our speakers, with Heather and Amy. So thank you again, everyone.
Good morning. How's that for volume? Good? Well, it is wonderful to be here. And again, my name is Amy Filer-Wunder. You'll learn a little more about me in one of my slides. And the title of our presentation is Be Becoming and Comfortable. There is a slash through comfortable. And so I think it's just appropriate to share based on what Will just shared. We certainly want you to be comfortable today as we embrace in conversations around cultural competent ways of thinking and learning and being, but also maybe at times a little uncomfortable as we reveal parts of self that at times maybe are difficult and challenging. So I'll just share that in reference to the introduction.
Hello, is this okay? So my name is Heather Hood-Curvilla, and I was really excited to get this invitation to come here with Amy and talk with all of you. Again, you'll get some more information about me when we progress to another slide, but I just wanted to, again, thank everyone for coming out on such a dreary day to have some really important but also difficult and challenging conversations.
I wanted to start with, should we stand or sit?
Where are you comfortable?
However, thank you. It is a Saturday morning. With that, the next slide, thank you for your presence today. And we like to make sure we take a moment because, again, based on what, do you prefer Will or William? Okay, so in reference to what William shared, it's a Saturday, it's rainy. I know when the alarm went off, it was that cozy kind of morning where staying in bed just a little longer was tempting. And we bring our complicated lives. Last night I was making walking tacos at my daughter's, at the football game. She's the drum major in the band, and that was until 10 o'clock after we hosted a consultant from the National Accreditation for Music program. So, you know, we bring our complicated lives here in this place, and so we appreciate your presence. And I just want to thank Stacy and William for this opportunity and to be in a space surrounded by art. I can't think of a better way to spend a Saturday morning.
Yeah, I likewise. I was running around last night trying to get new sneakers for my daughter. She decided she wants to run on the cross-country team. So the time I thought I would have to review slides and make notes for myself, I was at various stores up and down Route 100 trying to find shoes that were both functional and fashionable to a 10-year-old.
Yes.
Harder than they should be.
I just realized I need my glasses. That's the only thing I've realized at this time in my life, and thank you. All right, I'm going to just share a little bit about my professional self, and I want to honor my colleague here with me today, Dr. Ransky. She is the master. There's been some change over the last year in my professional life, and so I am still a professor of art education at Kutztown teaching one course, but I'm also the interim associate dean in the College of Visual and Performing Arts, and so honored to do that work and to continue working with my colleagues. And Nicole is now the master's coordinator of the master's program, which has been wonderful because it's such important work. I'm a former pre-K through 9th grade elementary art teacher. I'm currently the chair of the National Art Education Association Research Commission, the past coordinator of the Masters in Art Education program, and also the past chair of the department, which was through COVID, which has given me continuous things to reflect upon as we think about education and access and our learners and what they need through many years of what I call disruption and challenge and sometimes isolation and loss. And I think for me personally, I feel like some of those things I'm still healing from at times, and I see that with my students as well. My areas of research for the last, I guess, 14 years, which is also hard for me to say and recognize, is around the areas of identity and representation and then transdisciplinary studies. So that's a little bit about me professionally, and at times I'm also going to read from some of my writing. I'm also a farm girl from the rolling hills of Iowa. Yes, there are hills in Iowa. I'm the product of a working class family, first generation college student. My father is one of 12, as is my mother. My mother came from an economically challenged rural area of Iowa. Many of her siblings have faced mental health challenges and alcoholism. I have come to a fuller understanding of the values that growing up on a farm and living in a beautiful place, that was my aesthetic background, and the art that I experienced as a child. Although I was surrounded by challenge, there was always growth and birth. It is ever present on a farm. Seedlings, baby piglets, young calves, a litter of kittens. But I also recognize that I grew up with privileges. I'm white and raised Christian. And I am now middle class, but that even requires substantial unpacking when we look at middle class incomes today to the 70s and the rise in inflation. And I am the breadwinner for my family, which also comes with decisions about healthcare and retirement. These are only a few slices of my story. My purpose in telling part of this story is that this is ongoing work. The importance of being vulnerable, that returning to threads of one's stories brings new understandings and perspectives. And I've been happy to share those with my critical colleague and good friend, Heather.
Okay, so, thank you. So on the slide, you can see a little bit about me. I'm going to do a visual descriptor as well. So I'm a middle-aged Black woman. I'm wearing glasses and I wear my curly coiled hair. Today it's up in braids and then just pulled back away from the face, and I'm wearing a brightly patterned dress. So I hope that is of assistance to anyone that it helps. I am come from a museum background, so that was my first love, originally art museums, and then I branched out into other areas of the field, so I've been everywhere from children's history museums and historic sites through to the more traditional art museums and what we call encyclopedic museums. My work at Kutztown is focused in the Arts Administration program, which is a master's offered by the Art Ed department. I'm the program coordinator. I'm also an adjunct assistant professor in the program at University of Kentucky, and my courses are ethical and legal issues in the arts and civic engagement. My work outside of Kutztown, the past 2 years, has mostly focused on Agate Creatives, which is an Illinois nonprofit composed of BIPOC folks. And we are underemployed or unemployed within the field, marginalized, and we're working to bring diversity, equity, justice into the museum field, which has suffered a lot of issues, I would say over the past decade at least, but really brought to the forefront during the pandemic when a lot of our frontline workers and educators found themselves laid off by the institutions they've dedicated themselves to. My personal background, I'm a Jersey girl, so I'm really struggling to talk slow. I know I talk too fast sometimes. I'm from South Jersey, outside of Philly. I grew up in a small suburban neighborhood where my father was the first Black person to move into the neighborhood, and we really faced a lot of pushback and struggle because of that. I grew up with cherry bombs going off in the front door and in the mailbox of letters coming from people at least claiming to be the Klan, who knows if they actually were. I wasn't allowed to play in my front yard as a child because of the threats of violence. I share this because when we do these discussions around anti-racism and we're from the Northeast, I think it's easy to think this is a problem that isn't present here, and it is. All of the issues that exist in other parts of the country are here as well. They might not be as evident in our governance or as obvious in our institutions, but they are still here, and that's why I draw attention to my personal story to make it more, accessible for those who don't share that lived experience.
Thanks, Heather. And I forgot to describe myself. So I'm a white woman wearing glasses. I am middle-aged, soon to be 50. Okay, I said it out loud. I have brown, natural curly hair that is pinned back with a little gray showing through. And I often am smiling, so I hope that gives a little description. So part of the work that I do at the national level is in collaboration with the Commission on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity and Belonging. And part of our work is that we start with agreements, and if we had more time, we would work on those agreements together. I create agreements with my students of what we bring into the space and how we will work in the space together in order to open up dialogue in a place that hopefully feels brave, a place of not giving judgment to others, embracing potential discomforts, recognizing our airtime when we're having small group discussions or large group discussions, and expecting some non-disclosure. You may leave with some unanswered questions, which I think is part of this work. We hope some curiosities and a desire to learn more and do more. So what's our why today? You've heard us start a little bit with story. I'm gonna continue a little bit of that. That's a lot of what I do with my work. I've been collecting narratives from educators where we work back and forth through conversation, and it was over Zoom. I had a grant from the National Art Education Foundation, and I was going to go out to all these wonderful schools and visit with teachers and think about how their identities impact curriculum development along with their views of the learners, and then the pandemic happened, and so we had a lot of Zoom conversations, which I'm really grateful for because of everything that was happening around us. Those conversations were a rich opportunity for us to navigate those challenging spaces when teaching was changing so much, and really culture and society, we were feeling all those impacts as well. And we have a short little hands-on activity as well. So that's our time together. So I work a lot with this notion of landscaped narratives that highlight our layered histories of our stories and the impact of other stories on our stories, the forces that impact our understanding of individual identities, the social, the political, the cultural. We kind of push and pull as I think about my life growing up on the farm, along with the different spaces in which I taught. This work came from a critical colleague conversation over several years with Shiloh Brow, who at the time was a principal in one of the schools in the Baltimore School District. I think when we're in the midst of stories, we're also in the midst of tensions. So stories, especially when told in relationship to each other, the co-constructed work of being in a critical conversation are like estuaries. They're delicate, but also essential, but also brackish, but also necessary. So I was considered landlocked, but I grew up near the Mississippi River, and my transdisciplinary work has taken me to the Chincoteague Field Station, where we've looked at the ecosystem in relationship to the places, the estuaries, where the salt water and the fresh water meet. And so that became a metaphor for me to think about these brackish waters as places of tension, where that water intermixes. Without that tension, it would not be possible for that to be one of the most vital ecosystems in the world. And I think that's just a really, to me, a beautiful metaphor for thinking about the power of stories and the power of tension. So part of narrative work is remembering that we are always in the midst of something, and this comes from the work of Clandon and Connolly. I also have a friend who does work in the world of artography, so thinking about ourselves as artists and teachers and researchers, and Dan Barney talks about we're always entering in the middle. Like we're always entering in the middle of somewhere as artists. You know, I just recently completed a piece that was based on scraps from a previous artwork that had accidentally got thrown away, but I found some scraps, and so I was entering in the middle and returning to that work. And I think about my life as a teacher of now 25 years, I still am learning, you know, from my students every day. So when we're in the midst of, we have our personal and professional lives that are informing our work, our narratives of place. You'll see here a picture of Old Main at Kutztown University. So it's got a clock tower, pillars, right? It was the first building that would have been part of the university, and it mirrors very similarly the Old Main of my undergrad institution. We are always in the midst of the social, political, and cultural narratives. So as an example, when I was interviewing several of the art teachers that I've been working with, it was literally a day after George Floyd's murder, and that definitely informs our conversation in that moment. But we also are informed by our past, our present, and our future unfoldings. So how does our past inform us? The moment in time, right here, today, being in a museum together in this space, and our future needs. What are we hoping for and desiring as teachers, as professionals, and the many different identities that are part of who we are? So I think about right now, the present, past, and future as I think about the rising cost of higher education. Part of the work I do in the Dean's office is provide students with resources for students who are challenged with economic, academic, mental health. I also have a 17-year-old who is embarking on going to school, and the rising cost of an education are challenging even as a middle-class family. I also take very seriously that as a white educator, my identity and positionality is important. I also recognize that these spaces can be a form of performance. So my hope is to be very authentically to the story in which I tell, and I have not shared the challenges with mental health that my mother and her siblings have faced until this very day. And you can tell that my voice is shaking a little bit because it's a space of vulnerability, because of course we can choose the slices of the stories we tell and how that positions ourselves. And even in claiming to be an accomplice, I have to be cautious of that because I always am in a space of privilege and I can't ever remove myself from that. So I need to be careful of what the author Milner talks about as the dangers seen and unseen of actually reinscribing particular ways in which white dominance happens in spaces of teaching and curriculum and so forth. So that's really being in the space of discomfort. So part of the work that I've been doing and working with another colleague of mine, her name is Beth Rink, and I want to make sure I honor the work that we've done together. We presented at a conference, an art education conference last year at the University of Georgia. And we came to know each other because I went to one of her sessions at NAA and I said, oh my goodness, your work reminds me of the things I was doing in my doctoral work. We should chat, and we've had some Zoom conversations and dinners and continued our professional and personal relationship in that she is a young child and she's starting off in the field as a professor. And so what we started to do is look at our work that's now over a decade apart, and to look at the commonalities in this work and to really explore these spaces of discomfort. So this is from a manuscript that's under review right now. So recognizing that these discomforts are there, where is the curriculum a mirror of a learner's experience versus a deflection? And that comes from the work of Bishop. And what can we learn by listening to teachers' curriculum enactment while attending to the discomforts and what might be silenced in teaching and learning? And so part of narrative inquiry is using a research puzzle, posing ongoing questions and wonderings. So we, the co-author, Beth Link, and I, wanted to know what we might learn as serving as critical colleagues of each other by examining curriculum practices a decade apart with keen attention to the impact of race, class, and other intersecting identities on curriculum and the views of the learner. So a quick recap. This is a very shortened view and overview of my dissertation work. My project in my doctoral work examined the impact of socioeconomic status on curriculum creation and views of the learner. And Beth spent a year interviewing, observing, and eventually collaborating with 2 white elementary art teachers in a suburban district in the southern U.S. City. What we came to find a decade apart is that there's still much change that needs to happen. There is still a permanence of the dominant ideologies entrenched in curriculum pedagogy, a very white middle class ways of creating curriculum. The only art piece I saw as a child was Renoir's Girl with a Watering Can. That was the only piece of artwork I saw. I did go to a Catholic school. And I remember when I first started teaching that I wanted to make sure I taught all the masters because I had not experienced those, and I realized that I wasn't choosing art that matched the lived experience of my students. Our work still shows the coercive force of the habitus, of white habitus. And what we're going to spend time today is really the importance of understanding teacher identity and positionality and knowing the discomforts that exist within curriculum so that we can make learning more centered and more a mirror of learners' experiences. And we've thought about all of this, right, within the current landscape of COVID, global conflicts, political conversations, race and gender, my own school district that has been challenged with book bannings. How do we work with all these tensions? To imagine new futurings, as Amy Grady talks about, that innovate and renovate curriculum frameworks. So we do that, I believe, through looking at our professional identity. This is a definition I keep returning to. There are many out there, but this is one that I've held on to. This notion of inner and outer worlds, an inner world where we aspire to our own identities, and an outer world where the social reality of our identities can be assumed by others or even imposed by others. It is complex, it's viewed as eco-contextuality, it includes things such as race and ethnicity, religion, economic status, social class, gender, nationality, chosen interest, sexual identity, politics, and personal history. And so, with this in mind, we're going to have you do a short 4-minute reflection. So in your folders, we have a handout for you. And one of the challenges with narrative work, and I've had these conversations with my parents, is that our stories are never really fully our stories. They're also always somebody else's stories. And I realized in unpacking my doctoral work that I was telling stories of my family that maybe they didn't want me to tell. And so this is why this work is so, to me, a part of becoming and knowing. And over the years, my dad and I have had really powerful conversations about identity and representation. One of the things that an author by the name of Andrews, and this will be on your handout that we're going to be giving Stacy to give to all of you, is that when you're doing autoethnographic work and you're thinking about stories, that sometimes stories may cause pain, but they should not cause harm. And I think that's important to keep in mind. So for the 4-minute reflection, we'd like to give you some time to reflect on your story at this moment in time. And this is wherever you want to enter into that story. It can be personal, it can be professional, it can be both. And you can consider your past and present and future. And again, this is for you to decide where you want to enter into the part of your story. So we'll give you a little bit of time to write. Feel free to continue writing. I'm going to share another little segment of my story related to growing up on the farm, which will reference something that we're going to go back to a little later on, a little hands-on component. So as you're finishing writing, I'll just share a little more about being the product of Iowa farmland, because I think about Iowa farmland being so rich in soil and rich in stories of the people and place. I recently completed an artist's book called I Am of Iowa Soil and Dirt, or I Am of Dirt and Iowa Soil. And, I can pick up my voice, excellent. And part of that story is looking at my roots of growing up in the Iowa farmland, but also just access to vegetables and food production. Corn is most widely produced in Iowa, if you did not know that. Corn is in everything, and when people ask me, what did you grow on your farm, I'll say corn, and sometimes there's a notion that it was sweet corn, which we do really have good sweet corn. I might be biased about that in Iowa, but this is the corn that's used for ethanol and corn syrup, heavy use of pesticides. For farmers to survive, they often have to use those pesticides. So, like any story in landscape, these spaces are multi-layered and complicated. Again, why do I share this? I hope today our time together creates space to dig into the complicated layers of our stories related to time, place, and context. Although farmland is rich, it is also complicated by market-driven prices for crops impacted by government subsidies, the challenge of monolithic crop production and corporate farming, and that's just a few things. The patchwork quilt that I grew up on is reminiscent of the landscape that you saw earlier with the beautiful blocks of green and yellow is bucolic. Living on a farm also meant heavy labor. It also meant walks to the woods and time making dams in the creek. But it's more complicated. Like soil, there are many layers of nutrients and also concerns for the soil health due to environmental impact. The landscape I also grew up was faced with cultural challenges. Although I went to a Catholic school that taught about loving your neighbor, I saw photos of cross burnings in the local newspaper by the Ku Klux Klan on a regular basis. I could not make sense as a child these images based on what I was being taught in school. So what you see up on the screen now is the work of Marilyn Stewart, John White, and Kristen Condon created this mapping. Oh, I can hear myself echoing in this space. I apologize.
Oh,
I am so sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize. It felt like it was projecting. What you see here is a map that we're going to be referencing later, and this is, certainly not always that we think about identity. It's an entry point, and so I just wanted to put that up there so you could get the sense of how I'm speaking to geography, how I'm speaking to family background and occupation, and professional and personal identity. I've mentioned age, so just touch points around identity. So with that, we want to give you just a couple minutes to share if you're comfortable, or even if you're maybe a little uncomfortable in this great, we hope, brave space of sharing little bits of your story with someone. If your tables only have a few people, maybe you can all share if you feel comfortable. If there's a table with more people, maybe you want to share with a couple people next to you. So we'll just give you a minute for sharing. Yeah.
This was an interesting option. It's like passed by like someone. My story is like I grew up in Silicon Valley, an area of London. And the other two bound to be banned as these kind of students will love it. And so I started learning that I was
a lot of my kids read on like kindergartens and
that should be your self-use.
Hey, like, I know what's a big barrier. And then like, and then for the future, I can then share my story with other educators.
What brought you down?
Actually,
Maybe you should try that and then find out.
I feel like I was just telling my some folks this. Going from now it's a better plan. It's like big.
So I would say I started out
kids are like I have to go pick my cherry tree or something like that. And I remember the black students having clothes and they were just like, you can't wear that to school. Jackets, and I was like, I don't know if I get used to it. So I stay away from them. But one of my friends, her brother has a big better life. But you know, we go to there from my house, they you know, she becomes a teacher. You walk together. And then for my education. So that led me to whatever one happens, building challenges, energy together, and having kids. And even though we don't go to regions, but I guess I got it.
I am so sorry. I got your attention, right? Just get used to the microphone. My teacher voice, I feel like, is a fairly strong projection. Anyway, thank you for taking time to share your stories, wherever you entered into your story. And we hope that these will continue later on, and you are going to return to these. This is one of my favorite quotes, and it's from Mary Catherine Bateson's work that I read in graduate school, and I come back to it so often in my teaching and my art making and just my ways of being. And it talks about spiral learning, and it moves through complexity with partial understandings, allowing for later returns. For some people, what is ambiguous and not immediately applicable is discarded, while for others, much that is unclear is vaguely retained, taken in with peripheral vision for possible later clarification. So as we continue this work, I want to hand this over to Heather for more conversation related to this.
Okay, thank you. So Amy ended with a slide that has a quote, and I'm starting with one. And I have a couple of quotes sprinkled throughout that I think are powerful and useful. This one I'm sharing because I think it's important, and you're here, so you probably already know this, but the people you work with back in your professional space may not know this. Anti-racism work is mutual interest for everyone in your building. That is across racial and cultural and ethnic differences, that is up and down the hierarchy, including the learners. It benefits everyone, but it requires everyone to understand that, which we know can be very difficult. But so I just wanted to start with this quote and just underscoring that it is beneficial to everyone involved, no matter their individual positioning. Thank you. So what I wanted to share with you, and I guess I'll ask, is anyone familiar with this work already, Characteristics of White Supremacy Culture? A little bit, okay. So this is a list, and I'll be addressing this in a couple different ways, but this is a list of characteristics that have been identified as existing within predominantly white institutions and within white supremacy culture. And the first thing I want to underscore, because I know we see those words white supremacy and we get defensive, right? Because just if you see something on this list that you personally identify with, this does not say that you are a white supremacist at all. What it says is this is what you're operating within. And so you have internalized some of these things. It's part of being institutionalized. For me personally, that came through a private high school education, going to college and graduate school, and let me tell you about law school, okay? And then working in museums, which are predominantly white institutions and institutionalized spaces. These are the characteristics that exist within those spaces, and we are taught them from a young age and then really drilled into us during the course of higher education and working professionally. So I don't want you to look at this and say, I'm a perfectionist. Does that make me a white supremacist? No. No. It means that you exist within a culture that encourages these characteristics, and you have absorbed some of them. And that's okay. We all have them. So for instance, right to comfort. Amy has already talked a lot about how we need to acknowledge and engage with our discomfort in these difficult conversations. Right to comfort is the thing that happens at work when you try to tell someone that something they said you found to be harmful or disrespectful or not phrased in a way that was productive, and they get personally offended and maybe lash out, maybe complain to someone that doesn't need to be involved in the conversation, maybe starts crying at their desk. You have engaged with and attacked their right to comfort. They don't want to have that difficult conversation with you. They don't think they should have to. That's right to comfort. Another example on here, one right way. This is how we've always done it. So this is how we will continue doing it. Okay? This is a characteristic that exists in institutions, and if you find yourself falling into it in your personal and professional practices, it's because you're modeling the behavior you've been taught your entire life. It doesn't make you a bad person. It does not make you a white supremacist. I'll return again to perfectionism. I'm what we used to call in the 90s, I don't know if we still say this, I always self-identified as type A personality. I'm a perfectionist. I'm the person who the first edition of my book, I almost broke down because I found a typo deep in like chapter 4. I was like, how did this happen? Because I'm human. Did I remember to fix it in the second edition? I'm actually not sure. But that perfectionism in me, it was taught to me in school, it was drilled into me in law school, and in working in that field, now removed, happily. And that doesn't make me a white supremacist. It means I exist within those institutions, okay? So I just want to be very clear about that before I ask you to reflect on these yourself. I'm not going into detail on all of them because there's about 15, 16 of them. Many of them are, I think, pretty clear in their naming. You understand what they mean. The handout that you'll be receiving over email after this will include a link to the resource that really digs into these and helps you really understand them and engage with them. So that is coming, but we could spend the rest of the day doing this. So what I would like you to do on the back of that same sheet is, and I left the characteristics up on the screen for you, how does white supremacy, as I'm discussing it here, impact your work? And is this internal within you, my personal struggle with perfectionism, or is it external, pushback you're getting from students, other educators, administrators, colleagues? It could be both. It could be neither. Tell me where you work. But so just take a few moments and just do some self-reflection on how these might be impacting you.
And what I mentioned earlier between the work with Beth Link and myself and over the 10 years within curriculum and that notion of habitus, that is what Heather was just describing so beautifully. I just want to connect that to what I was talking about earlier.
So what I'm going to ask is if within your comfort level, if you would like to share with your table a little bit of your reflecting, and we can do it the same way Amy said, so smaller tables share together. I know this is difficult and some of you probably are feeling some discomfort. If it's a matter of it's just too uncomfortable or you don't feel safe sharing, I'm not asking you to do that. But if it's just a little uncomfortable and you're pushing boundaries, I do ask that you work with that and see if there is a way for you to share. We'll just do that for a few minutes.
Could you please explain paternalism a little bit more?
Sure. So the question is about, let me go back. Paternalism. So this is the way I talk about this is how many of you have ever felt like, why can't they just treat us like adults, right? I was having this conversation with my husband yesterday. He was talking about some changes in how they're doing leave at his work. And they still, I don't understand how they're doing this. They have unlimited personal time, but now they have this new category of time where if you're taking care of a parent or a relative, but it's not FMLA, it's kind of in that gray area, you can take these half-day increments, but you have to tell them why. And I was like, but you have unlimited personal time. Why do you have to tell them that our daughter has to go to the dentist or your mother has a doctor's appointment or like what is happening? And it's almost, this is me projecting on his job, as though they don't trust that people are using the personal time for the reason that they think is okay. So even though he should be able to just take that time because they've unlimited personal time, now they have this other category where you have to go to your supervisor and say, my kid has their annual checkup. And theoretically, because it's not the bucket of unlimited personal time, they could say, well, you have a meeting that afternoon. No. When he knows he has a meeting, he wouldn't make that conflict. So it's that parenting structure that kind of gets imposed into our work and our professional relationships that does not need to be there.
I would think about it as the surveillance world in which we live in. Constantly feeling monitored, right? Behavior, the simple behavior checks, within a classroom setting that becomes so much part of the education system, like sitting up straight,
Eyes forward,
legs pretzel style, right? This is not about your comfort. This is about me. I'm not saying that I would give you an example. Me as teacher, making sure that you are all where I need you to be so that I can stay in this role of power and authority.
Thank you.
Thank you for a wonderful question. So I'm sorry, just returning a few moments, I know everyone forgot, just a few minutes of sharing with your table within your comfort and maybe pushing a little against your discomfort.
Yeah, you want to share?
I feel like I learned about this I often speak not considering that same kind of message and so when you have these types of objects their birthdays, flowers, walking in circles, cards of So, and I often got D for spending too much time on communication.
I'm so patient.
I'm curious in this other way of thinking about that when the outcome is clear, we're not going to get there just by saying we love extra schools, we talk with this many students, we like class functions, seats, we like this.
I feel a lot of extra pressure with this,
I'm just wondering
Well, especially the quantified is like if it can't be quantified, it's not real.
it's more valuable.
Yeah. Conversations with each other as the artists share their stories. So I think it would be a great idea. Theater is challenging. And so this week when my students, so I had a little letter.
Hello? There's some amazing conversations happening.
So anyway, and after I'm sorry, I'm forgetting who it was. And she's a theater person, and she's like, I just feel every time I was Charlie's, but I like, our kids on the good. Right to
No-brainer, right? Like, but it's
Like I should be able to say, this underserved.
it says, I think
it should be a no-brainer what is going to but then I always the question, have you done research? What's it take, right? Like, do you have any results on this or that? It's always like this number. And so there's like research that you learning and do research or have you feedback or do you not what's up? Literacy, like how many different things that you just in my mission statement alone, telling you how we're going to improve these college meetings. Like we really need these numbers to tell.
And so I need to share this idea. So how do you think that's how does it want to conversation and then right. And what I feel so
but there was tension.
So I'm going to call you back in, and I want to thank all of you for having what seemed to be very animated and building conversations at your table. I know a lot of us are sitting with people who are maybe strangers to us, so engaging in this type of conversation is really powerful, and I appreciate you doing it.
To the boards. I didn't.
So this, I'm sharing an artwork that draws on these characteristics of white supremacy, and this artist created these broadsheets and pamphlet books, and she characterized these, that wasn't a good choice of words, repetitive, characteristics of white supremacy as poison. And so each one of these little poisons need their own antidote. So she created this broadsheet called Take the Antidote, and this is, I can see that part.
Oh, yeah.
I'm too nearsighted. So what she has here is, she says a culture is a way of life for a group of people, and again, adapted from the white supremacy culture. This original writing is from 1999. It exists online as a living document, and that's what I'll be sharing the link to in the worksheet you'll receive. And it says in there, our institutions not only value these characteristics, they to some extent require them and constantly reproduce them in order to benefit from them, which is why they are so prevalent in our culture and institutions. So I wanted to give an example, saying it's from the trenches, because I did say at the beginning that the fact that these characteristics exist within your institution, or if you internalize them, is not a defining factor of you yourself being a white supremacist. And so the example I wanted to give was from a BIPOC-centered collective that came together over social media in the summer of 2020. And this post that I'm sharing was shared across social media and a number of museum professional spaces and groups, some geared towards certain areas of the profession and some geared towards BIPOC professionals within the museum field. And the post was looking for BIPOC museum workers to come together to be paid to work on an exhibition, a traveling exhibition that would explore issues of race within American families. And I was one of the people who responded to this call and attended the initial meeting and then opted to join into what they were creating. And what happened is everyone who responded to the call was obviously interested in the work. What I don't think the organizers anticipated was that everyone who was responding would themselves be in different stages of their own anti-racism journey and be more and less comfortable with doing the difficult internal work and cross-individual work necessary to really engage in something like this. So this was supposed to be non-hierarchical. It was supposed to be based on power sharing. It was supposed to be based on centering the voices and lived experiences of BIPOC museum professionals. And there were a lot of strengths in the organization that came from this. It was an absolutely amazing and important goal to create this exhibit. And the people involved, I can tell you, I met some absolutely amazing people. Everything from people who've been in the field for longer than I, to people who were finishing up their master's degrees, hadn't even fully entered the field outside of maybe an internship. And I just was able to really connect with and get to know people from all over the country that it was really a pleasure. There were some weaknesses though. Like I said, everyone was on a different part of their path of anti-racism work and their understanding of what that meant, and also what we even meant by family or what we meant by race, and that created problems. There also were inherent PWI, predominantly white institution structures that we all carried into this work despite us being a group of BIPOC. So we had power hoarding, we had information being siloed. Some parts of the collective ended up working in very hierarchical manners while others were trying to do the work in the non-hierarchical framework, which I will share in a few slides, is much more complex and much slower than a hierarchical approach. So the group ended up kind of splintering, unfortunately, into two groups. What some of us, and I'm not saying that either group was right or wrong, I'm saying that we carried in to the space some things that we were maybe not quite cognizant of, and then weren't fully sure of how to address those issues. And I'm sharing this quote here, there's power in naming racism and calling it out. And again, there were people who were willing, in what ended up being two groups, people in both groups were willing to call out that racism and willing to call out those PWI structures, and others who weren't there yet, weren't ready to look internally and see what was happening, weren't ready to look at the group and see what was happening. So this is what we're probably used to at work, right? It's just a typical hierarchical structure. We can also replicate this within our teaching and learning environment. Us as the teacher, as the educator on top, and then the students below in that staff kind of level. And like I said, this happened in some parts of the collective that I had joined back in 2020. And this was the goal. This is what we had planned on. This is a non-hierarchical framework for an organization or institution. And I color-coded it, but I didn't label it because it works across institutions. So with the group that I'm with now, we consider right now we've got some grants out. Right now we're technically volunteering for ourselves. But our future planning, what we've built into our bylaws and our parameters of engagement is that as people join us in future projects, doesn't matter if they're full-time, if they're part-time, if they're volunteers, or if they're contractors, they're members for the duration that they're with us. That means that they can take on any role. So you can see that sometimes you have pink as a hub, or you have green as a hub, or you have yellow as a hub. It doesn't matter if you are the person that we've decided is the content expert or is most well positioned, then we're not going to say, but you're a volunteer, so you really can't take that on, or you're only with us part-time. We are really dedicated to making it work no matter external obligations or personal positioning at the time. And, next slide please. And our hope and our goal is that this addresses some of those characteristics of white supremacy. It's more difficult, but so far it's been very worthwhile with the small projects we've managed to accomplish. We're working on bigger things right now. So I must call out Agate Creatives. We are an Illinois nonprofit. We are 501c3, and we recognize that we ourselves are always working and climbing towards being not just self-proclaimed allies to various communities, but to earn that label of ally and hopefully make it all the way up to co-conspirator with every marginalized group of people or individuals that we are working with through our future projects. So this is a quote from one of the founders of Museums Are Not Neutral that she was giving at Museum Computer Network, one of their talks. Normal is broken, normal is oppressive, normal hurts. Just because it's normal, it's what you're used to, it's what you're comfortable with, does not mean it's the best practice for yourself or for those around you that you're working with. And if you can step away from normal and bring some really good self-reflection and engagement with your own, internalized biases and assumptions, then you can move past into something that is more responsive to your own personal needs, the needs of your peers, the needs of your students, and I think be more healthy in the long term. So I do just want to briefly talk about this, what does it mean to be non-hierarchical? I showed you kind of how we're laid out. To be a non-hierarchical space, you are going to be required to make sure all voices are heard, and it's going to be required that all opinions are given weight and consideration. And then how do you reach any kind of decision in this? It's difficult. There's a lot of options. And how you do it might depend on the norms that you've created within your group. I mentioned Creatives has a parameters of engagement where we've really struggled with this and to make sure that we're hearing everyone. It could be up-down voting, it could be consensus, it depends on size and scope and also the complexity of what it is you're deciding. Not everything needs to be a big drawn-out conversation, but some things do, and you need to make space for that. This is some risks and the idea of being inefficient that comes from volunteer-managed nonprofit organizations. I think it applies in the work that probably a lot of you are doing as well, and that's why I bring it to you. This idea that it can become non-democratic, that it is time-consuming and ineffective, that everyone has to be kind of homogenous in where they're coming from and what their goals are for everyone to reach a consensus. And this isn't really true. The research says it's not true, and I can tell you from my work that it's not true. So the important things are you need to develop a culture of trust and acceptance within your organization. People need to feel comfortable talking to each other, sharing with each other. You need to take a mission-first approach. You can have a mission for your classroom. You can develop that with your students. You can have a mission with your department, with the school, with the district. Whatever level works with what you're doing, you can do that. My daughter had a mission in her classroom last year, and I was so excited when I heard about it. I was like, I need to talk to Mrs. Bala. And then you have to remember that democracy takes time. You have to be willing to put in the work and know that sometimes things are going to go slow. If you have a hierarchy of what's important and weighty versus what's unimportant and mundane, then you can decide when those deep, serious conversations need to happen. Some things, you have someone in your group, in your collective, who is the content expert or who everyone has decided is taking the key role for this project. And then the question is, so do we pay the Zoom bill on time, right? Do we renew the URL for the website? You don't need a conversation. You have someone you've empowered. Let them execute that power. Let them make the decision. They have the ability to run the credit card. They have the ability to sign the check. No one needs to come back and question them on that decision. You've decided together that that's a mundane, routine task and someone is in charge of it. Part of my role at Educators is filing our 990. No one checks, no one double checks. Obviously the board does, I should say. But the other members, they know that they trust me to do it and to get it in on time. And I come back and say, hey, I need this information. I need to know what our first, whatever it is that I need, I know who to go to. And then they trust me to do what they've empowered me to do. Now, if it's a non-intuitive issue, do we need to revamp? I'll tell you a big one we had actually. Did we want to stay on Twitter? Our ultimate decision was no, but it was a back and forth over the course of a few meetings with the direction the social media platform was going and what our mission statement was and what our stated values were. Was Twitter a platform we wanted to remain on, or was being there not in alignment with our values? And we went back and forth about it because we had good engagement on that platform, but ultimately we decided as a collective that it wasn't the right place for us and we would focus our energies elsewhere. Okay? That is not something that we just handed over to the person who really is at the front of our social media strategy. It was a conversation we all had to have together. Okay? So, just to bring an example of what this could look like in a teaching setting. This is a rubric that was developed by my students last semester. They were presenting a lesson plan that they had developed in class. So they were presenting it to the classroom as their final project. And as part of that, I wanted them to do peer assessments. I could have developed something for them, anything, and handed it out and said, fill this out. These are the people you're doing peer assessments of. Here's your 3 peers. When they present, fill this out, hand it in. But I chose not to do that. I chose to make the conversation of, what is it that you think it's important for you to be assessing? What is important about this assignment? What is important for you to be paying attention to and learning from your peers? And then what does that look like on the actual piece of paper that will be handed out? So I could have done it myself. It would probably have not taken me too long. I would have adapted it from another rubric I used in another class. Instead, I spent 3 class sessions on this. So it started out with brainstorming on the whiteboard, get no idea is a bad idea, putting everything up, even if I would think it was redundant to what another student said, just getting everything up, getting that brain dump out. I took a picture of that, I typed up the list, I sent it out to everyone, I said, think about it for the next 2 days. We'll do it again. We come back together and we break down into small groups and they start saying, you know, these 2 things are kind of the same and this we don't think is important, but this other table over here is going to come back and say it's important. And now we have to get together as a group again and work through that, right? And then I posed them the question of, is there anything on here that's really my job as your instructor that you're taking on and do you want to hand it back to me? And there were some things that fell off. They said, we don't really think that it's something that we should be assessing, or we think that you should be evaluating as the instructor, and those things fell off. And then I came to them with this, something very similar to this. We put it up on the screen, we made final edits, everyone approved it, and this is what they used for their peer assessments at the end of the semester. Like I said, I could have done it myself in my office and it would have been over and done with. I took 3 class sessions to make it happen. And I'm going to hand you back to Amy.
Thank you so much, Heather. That's a great example of working in that non-hierarchical structure in the classroom. And when we started, and I mentioned the notion of being present, I've been working with my students to also continuously create the space where we are colleagues of each other and recognizing that still at the end of the day, right, I'm listed as their professor, and what does that mean in terms of power and privilege and how the culture of our classroom unfolds over time. But last spring, we have something in our department that I think we use quite often, participation, professionalism as part of their work towards becoming teachers. And I wanted the students to be a broader part of that. And so we talked about what it means to be present in class, especially through the COVID time, however we might want to describe that. I don't know if we have a way of giving that some form of category at this point, and maybe we shouldn't. And so we listed on the board what it means to be present. I talked about my experiences in the elementary classroom and recognizing, when the 3rd graders came after lunch, right, there might have been a big debate over the newest toy on the market and who had it and who didn't and what was for lunch, and maybe they were still hungry, right? And all these things that are coming into that space, right? And so we made a list together, and they reflect at the end of every class on their notions of what it means to be present in class and to be present as a human in that space. And so it's really, and then they said, what are the points? They want to know the points. And I said, don't think about it, just reflect, right? And ultimately, I'm not really assigning points to you. It's just this notion of thinking about presence. So I think it fits with your example. And we've also created some assessments together. So also part of my ongoing work, and this really goes back to working with another teacher when I first started at Kutztown, Rhonda Tamel, in terms of thinking about, again, use of the curriculum, use of learners, and she was working with paper dolls in her classroom as a way for students to unpack aspects of identity. I want to say, and I don't have time to go into the whole history of paper dolls. There is a rich history, very white, around paper dolls. And I recognize that they are riddled with stereotypes, but that is part and parcel to why we have used paper dolls in the classroom. So one of the things I ask the students to do, or that we do together, is to write, when I say art teacher, what comes to mind, and they reflect. If I say, elementary teacher, what comes to mind? And so we do this whole series of reflection. There are many, many reflections and unpacking of ways in which teacher lives in culture and society before we ever get to the place where they're making their own dolls, their own paper dolls, and then we Google. So after they reflect, then we'll Google art teacher. Do you all know what comes up? What up? No, I haven't seen that. It's usually bright colored clothes, always happy. You are always happy as the teacher. Did you not all know that? You're always supposed to be happy every minute of the day. And bright and cheery. Now, it's interesting because I've done it over the years, and there has been some change. But if you put in just teacher, it is still usually somebody in front of a chalkboard or a whiteboard, someone usually wearing a collared shirt. If you put anything with science or math, what do you think you see? Yeah. Now, I have not done it recently, so maybe there's been change since the last time. But that is one of the things that we do in terms of unpacking, right, this notion of teacher and how it has lived in spaces. Dan Laurie talks about the long apprenticeship of teaching. He wrote in the 70s, and it's something I return to quite often. We, and when I say we, individuals who are educators, have a long apprenticeship of what it means to be a teacher. Because for probably most of us in this room, if you name yourself as an educator, and I'm saying in schools and museums and community centers, you have observed people being teachers. I was teaching my sister, she's 7 years younger, I had bulletin board. I made bulletin boards when I was like 5. I'm not actually kidding, I really did. I wanted to be a teacher from a very early age. But we see these notions of what it means to be a teacher because many of us have been in school systems, right? Even if homeschooled, you were probably seeing some modeling of what it means to be a teacher because it's so embedded in our culture and our history. And when I say our, I'm talking American history, the kind of white traditional history, white females as teachers. So I hope that gives us a little more depth. So one of the things my students work with and that I've worked with is this notion of narrative collages. And that these are layered and visual expressions of them as artists and teachers, and that they are representing the tensions and the possibilities within education. I have another manuscript that's in its second review, and this is a call to think about how we create opportunities for civic engagement in the classroom. And so I work with my students to talk about the framing of their work as a form of civic engagement, to create spaces for the amplification of voice. And when I say voice, I am not just talking about speaking, that could be signing, creating artwork, thinking about language in its complex ways. So really drawing from their lived inquiry, what they are curious about, the questions that they are asking as future teachers. I mean, I get questions like, is it okay that I have a tattoo? And they're really worried about it and bothered about it. To even more complex questions about, am I really going to be able to be a teacher if I identify as part of the LGBTQIA+ community? Am I really going to be able to do this? And they're looking to me sometimes for these answers or for my thoughts. And they do create spaces of tension and I hope possibilities. And so through narrative collage work, which also comes out of the work of Charles Gregorian, also will be on the handout, we're using language, images, materials, situations, space, and time in the creation of these paper dolls. So what I have here are snippets. These are snippets of clothes and accessories that students shared that I could share. And I wanted you to just get a little glimpse of what they might be saying through the paper dolls. These are the questions that I've posed to them. This has been an ongoing project now for probably over 10 years, so the questions have shifted, and these questions also became part of your reflections. So for them to think about the clothes and accessories that would reflect their identities most important to you at this moment in time. Given that sometimes these are difficult conversations, I find students sometimes are hesitant. I would say in the last couple of years, I feel students are less hesitant and really want to get into these more challenging conversations about the ways in which identity, representation, and positionality operate within schools and are normalized, and ways in which that they can push back on these normalized ways of being a teacher. So then they start to think about, and this is over weeks of the course, clothes or accessories that you include to illustrate a tension between your personal and professional identity and identities placed on educators by society, school, and other educators. You know, one of my favorite things when I was a beginning teacher, I was told not to smile until December. Okay, that's not me. What stereotypes exist around the identity of teacher, and how do you address this as a future professional? And how has personal factors such as class, race, gender, and or other identities, age, disabilities, and everything that needs to be impacted in that word, disabilities, sexual orientation, identity, inform your professional identities. I'm going to share 2 examples, and my students have given, I asked them if it was okay if I shared, and they said absolutely. I wish it was their voice, but I am going to read their writing. So, a becoming teacher story. The parts of my identity that I value the most are my ethnicity, my beliefs, my queerness, my recreational hobbies, and my geography. I tried to incorporate all of these intersecting identities into my paper doll. For my ethnicity, I incorporated a Dominican flag and a Puerto Rican flag. This represents the pride found in my ethnicity. Doing this allows me to pay tribute to the culture that raised, encouraged, supported, and corrected me. My culture and ethnicity are also heavily responsible for my values and beliefs. This facet of my identity was translated through signs and banners I created to represent my activism and passion for equality and inclusivity. This is something I hope to bring to the classroom. By bringing my passion for inclusivity into my classroom and, quote, engaging in the study of gender, race, class, or sexual orientation from Bolin and Hoskins 2015, I can foster an environment free of judgment, therefore allowing my students to reflect on their own individual experiences through creativity and self-expression. Geography is a huge part of my identity and my future. This is translated to the backdrop for my doll, which I chose to be the skyline of New York City, my home. And what is so powerful to me, knowing this student over time, is that he talked about, in sharing this, he wanted to write what it means to be a teacher outside of whiteness, and not to be from PA or New Jersey, but to be from New York City. We have to keep track of time. Okay. There's more to that, but I want to share this one as well. I am very caring towards my friends and loved ones, but if I feel any malicious intent from people, I will tell you the student would not, when you met her, you did not feel that she had one malicious intent, like part of who she is, right? But if she feels that from someone towards another, I am not afraid to stand up for what I believe and defend the people I care about. That's her choice in having skinned knees. I usually almost never get angry or yell. However, I do know that I can come across as mean looking when I am focused, so I try to be mindful. Another major part of my identity is being a creative, open-minded person who will listen to both sides of the story and not make judgment. I hope that with these identities and parts of my identity and the new information that I'm learning and experiences that are to come, these will create a solid foundation as a teacher. When I read Resources of Engaged Pedagogy by Bell Hooks, I had never heard of this type of teaching, formally by its name, this notion of relational teaching. I realized many of the morals, such as the relationships developed between students and teachers, being more equal, and both considered learners and the group and community of teachers working together to help each other succeed. And one thing that she shared with me over time, because I was also her advisor, is that she was really working to break down power dynamics. She identifies in the Latinx community, and she talked a lot about being raised by a single mother and the weight of socioeconomic status on her in terms of caring for her family. So with these in mind, and considering stories told, I'm going to very briefly, I will give the reference to this book, but I think this is important when you're doing this work related to anti-racist teaching, breaking down notions of white supremacy, thinking about habitus, the way in which ideologies function within schools, is that there's different forms of story. And I didn't put the author's name on this, but I do have it. This comes from, it comes to me. I'll come back to it. I forgot to put it on this slide. I think it's on it's in, the author is named Bell. The last name is Bell. But there are stories that we tell as humans, and especially in education, that continue to perpetuate the things that both Heather and I have spoken about. So stock stories are those stories that are told by the dominant group. A really common one is the American dream. If you just work hard, I can tell you my father works hard every day, but he will never be able to get out of the economic situation in which he was in because he was not afforded the opportunity to go to school. He does not come from generational wealth. I love my father dearly. He works at a grocery store. He loves what he does. But no matter how many hours he works, at the age of 70, he will not be able to get out of the economic challenge of living in rural America and on a farm. That is not the same for everybody. That is just my dad's story. Concealed story. So these are stories that start to be uncovered when we look at historical and social data about how race shapes society. And I think the examples you shared highlight the ways in which they are part of stock stories, but if we dig a little deeper, I think a lot about positionality as a female. And I know that I am part of the story of white female teaching, but at the same time, the kind of concealed stories of, or things, people have good intentions, but they don't realize, things that they're saying. Example, when I started the university, they're like, oh, what is your husband teaching? I'm actually the professor, right? Like this notion of what roles we played, and the fact that my husband takes my daughter to most of her dentist and doctor appointments because he has a more flexible schedule than I do. And they seem small, but they have huge meaning in them, in the ways in which gender, as one example, and income function. Resistance stories, right? Stories where we challenge stock stories, which the examples of, is it Aggie? Thanks. Yeah. And then emergent and transformative stories, which I know my students were working towards, right, in telling counter stories of what it means to be a teacher. So with that, because I know we're going to run out of time, we have a short little hands-on activity for you. Do we still have time to do something? Okay. So what I brought for you today are little mailing tags. They kind of have, I use them in my own bookmaking, so I just love things related to bookmaking. I also think it's interesting, mailing tags and the notion of tags and clothing, right? So we're going to give you a few minutes to think of an accessory or a piece of clothing that represents part of you at this moment in time. And it's okay if you want to play into stereotypes or play with stereotypes. And I've had students say, like, I really like the colorful aprons that our teachers wear. Okay, then yeah, it's about you. What identities are you choosing? Because you're choosing them and not feeling that it's something imposed on you. Okay? So that's what you're going to have time to do. Clothing accessories. You can have more than one tag. If you want to speak to tensions, I invite you to embrace any of those tensions or discomforts that we talked about in ways in which you thought about what it means to be an educator. And that, again, any site that you're an educator, we are educators in many different spaces and places each and every day, or just you as a human. And then I'll put this up as a little reminder of those parts of identity. Does that make sense? Clothing, accessories, shoes, costumes. Okay? up and say something about you at this moment in time. You can draw it if you're feeling like an artist, or you can write it if you're feeling like a writer. You can doodle if you're so sorry.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, my only thoughts were
First and comfort.
work it out.
No, please go ahead. We embrace. Thank you for bringing us lunch. Yeah, on a Saturday.
Yeah, right.
All right, I'm going to bring us back to embrace a little comfort/distance. So this is based on the work that I've worked on over really the last 2 years with my colleague Beth Link. And I'll make sure again to put some of these references on our handout. This is a manuscript in review, so it's not officially published, but we did present, like I said, on this topic at the University of Georgia last fall. And as we were working on our article, and it's going back to that notion of ideologies and habitus and unpacking positionality, we were thinking, this is something I've learned as a writer, because writing is a space of joy and tension for me. What are we going to be? I'm embracing, that's like a British. That's
just teacher.
Teacher life, yeah, exactly. What do we want to leave our audience, our reader, to consider? And so these are much more broken down in the article, in the manuscript, and I'll reach out to my colleague and maybe I can give you a little more. But I'm just going to, I think these are good provocations for thought related to what we've been talking about. To remember that curriculum is rich in history and tradition, and that these histories and traditions need to be broken and reimagined. And this speaks to things that you're talking about in terms of hierarchies. Acknowledging one's teacher's story and the impact that has on curriculum. And I know that my story creates particular biases that I still continue to wrestle with, and could give numerous examples of things just recently I've been wrestling with in my classroom and having these conversations with my students. And what it means to teach in the world in which we occupy. That race, class, and power are always part of the curriculum. We cannot get out of that. It is always there. And race is a construct. Class is something that people do not like to talk about. Or race, often. And power exists because we have a structure where it's inherent. Even if I try to break down the power dynamics with my students at the end of the semester, I must put grades into the system.
You must, I'm sorry, that last.
Oh, must put grades into the system, I must put a grade. I wish I could leave them with a narrative, a conversation, a moment. Plan to address identity and be willing to deviate from the plan. Identity work is complex, it is not linear, it is extremely non-linear, and it is ever shifting and changing. And even some of my early work, I was just sharing with some colleagues and so forth, the first article I wrote about paper dolls, it's outdated, but I do think it was a starting point for this type of work. And critical work is difficult to sustain. We need to foster community and share the power. So going back to Bell Hooks, she calls for this engaged voice. That is a voice that is never fixed or absolute, but always changing, always evolving in dialogue with the world beyond itself. And this is some recent writing in this next bullet related to water that I composed. Water in rivers and streams can appear still, yet water is always in motion. Motion builds to the deluge of rain, and the forces of water become uncomfortable, breaking borders, surpassing boundaries, reinscribing shorelines, flooding, then receding. Water creates extreme tensions, but also life. Critical conversations exist in these spaces of tension.
Okay, and I just wanted to share this reminder because it can be easy to forget. Allyship is a verb. It's not a noun we apply to ourselves. It's something that we're doing every day. This work, as Amy just said, is ongoing. It's hard, it's difficult, it's uncomfortable. So I encourage you to keep working and keep learning. Embrace your mistakes, acknowledge them, apologize, and do better tomorrow. Okay? Don't get bogged down in what you didn't know yesterday. Know that you're still growing in this work. Progress requires movement. If you're staying still, you're not progressing. If you're not challenging yourself, if it's not difficult, you're not progressing. Listening is an active activity. Learning is lifelong. Power sharing is scary. It's difficult, and it's vitally important. So that's what I would like to leave you with.
And then my last slide related to some earlier work with Shyla Rao. As I said, when I was working with her, she was a principal in the Baltimore School District. We named this Empowered Voice Pedagogy. And that voice is communicating and creating. And again, voice is not just speaking, but voice is creating, again, using different forms of language, different forms of communication. But it's always in tandem, as Heather just shared, with listening and reflecting to work towards spaces of empathetic understanding. That our stories are shared so that we can become better each and every day at doing this difficult and challenging work and fight work. So thank you for being present with us for the last bit of time. More than a bit of time. And now I think I turn it over to Stacy. Hi everyone.
I'm Stacey Brennan. I'm the curator of education. I wanted to thank our speakers, Heather and Amy, for a really rich conversation, and thank all of you for your participation. We're going to take about a 15-minute break, grab your lunches, use the restroom. Please feel free to explore the space, and then we're going to come back and have lunch together. And Dr. Latoya Council is going to walk us through some questions and conversations to have around the table. And then we're going to have our following speaker, Flavia Zuniga West, this afternoon starting at 1 o'clock. So please help yourself to lunch and let us know if you have any questions. But thank you so much for being here.
My name is LaToya Council. I am here to do the lunch hour discussion with you all. I see that every table is busy with conversations, which is amazing. So this will smoothly kind of fit into probably what you're already talking about. But the whole idea is to continue the conversation that we were having with the first workshop about what does it mean to be in a space where we're trying to teach diverse perspectives through art, like creating inclusive classrooms. So if you look inside of your envelopes, your folders, you will see some lunch hour discussion questions. And we would like for you all to read through the questions, reflect on the questions, have a discussion with the questions, and then we're going to come back before our next session, and we're going to all kind of like outshare particularly question number 5. So questions 1 through 4, if we notice, it goes from general to more specific. And so the first question, the workshop is titled, Reaching and Teaching Diverse Perspectives Through Art. Please share with the group what prompted you to sign up for a workshop that approaches teaching diverse perspectives through art. So very generally, what brought you here today? Why are you interested? And the second question, please share with your group the tools and strategies you use and put into practice related to certain and inclusive to create an inclusive and culturally aware learning environment for your students? What understandings and new knowledge are you hoping to gain in the workshop? So we can learn, what do you already do, right? This is a room full of educators, so we know that we're already doing something, and we can each learn from each other. And then the third question is, for you, what does it mean to be an educator who is intentional about creating an inclusive and culturally aware learning environment for students from diverse backgrounds that sparks creativity? Why is this important for you? Like, what does it mean? Kind of continuing the discussion that we had in the first workshop. And then number 4, we're asking you to reflect on your higher education experiences, reflect on where you are, and share how you felt supported, appreciated, and included inside the classroom, right, in your own personal life as you navigated higher ed. And then how were you not supported or felt you were not encouraged to be creative in the classroom? That's bringing that personal and moving into making it political. And then we want to end with strategies that we can take with us, things that we can do from our conversation. What can you take with you from this space, this group conversation, and use inside of your classroom now that we've learned from each other and reflected on our own personal experiences? And then please share how you feel empowered to design a culturally inclusive and creative learning environment for your students. And then please share what types of supports you need to do this necessary, but at times challenging work. And so we'll come back and we'll all kind of outshare question number 5 and how we got there. So thank you all so much. We're looking forward to a wonderful dialogue. Thank you.
Yeah, how did you
teaching at our school, our focus this year is arts and celebration. And we want to make sure that we incorporate the arts into the regular ed subjects.
They're close, like you retired. There's a new place coming.
I think they're gonna have brown beers. I think it's coffee to go.
Beginning that journey right now. So everything else in here, that learning more experience.
I sometimes struggle with life. Because without even thinking about it, I was like, having like different ways to engage
That's why I wrote my dissertation.
and I am like really and then right from I found that program right, so they were like we didn't get
Every year, one of my favorite things to do is science. I asked them.
and then that really brought but then I
One of really the first part of this question is, what can you take with you from this space, this group conversation, and use inside of your classroom, or wherever you find yourself in a space of being an educator, which I feel like as an educator, that's all the time for me. Every space is an educational space. So what can you, I want to hear from some folks, what can you take away from this conversation with you?
I find, I'm a theater person, I can speak. I find that it keeps going back to listening to each other's story. What are the commonalities that we find, which makes it relatable universally, and connecting those commonalities to whatever art form that I'm teaching. I like to work collaboratively a lot, especially with my younger students, because they're connected to the work, so they're more invested in the work, and because we are constantly changing, we're constantly growing, the world is constantly changing. There's a never-ending possibility of how the art form is going to keep evolving. There's, how it's always going to be relevant to this day, this time, if we include today's stories or yesterday's stories, with today's students, right? We listen to these stories and we're like, you have content, and what's beautiful about the creative arts, just the arts, is that you can create any kind of content, right? If you have a solid story. And we all have these solid stories, and finding that commonality, because, really you want the element of relatability as well in order to reach more people, right? We all brush our teeth, and we all had some sort of daily routine growing up, right? Whether you were Black or white or Asian or whatever, or grew up in overprivileged or underprivileged, there's these certain commonalities. And then we can start to pick apart, okay, well, what made your common thing unique? What limited it? What encouraged it? What was the challenge you overcame because of? And then sort of, because the times are always changing, there's just a never-ending possibility to the material. And so I think always getting into the people's stories is so important to continuously do, instead of, we were talking about grant writing and finding out the numbers, right? All these quantitative, well, how many people is it gonna reach? Or how many people is it gonna benefit? It's like, yeah, but how do we take today's stories, just create works that are relevant today because this is who we are today? I don't know if that answered the question, but I know I'm definitely going to take with me, really not just. I know I like to do collaborative works and say, okay, let's take this. What does it mean to you? And then we're going to make a piece around it, but really just get deeper into people's stories, which will always make it relevant, I think. And deeper.
No, I think that is a beautiful summary of what to take away, right? Collaboration is key, like finding these ideas that bring commonality across social categories that also makes room for the differences, because the differences are also important, right? I know, like, in my world, my co-authors and I wrote in our first book, we strive to be equal but not all the same. Like that's a line in our book, like we're not looking for sameness, but there is this idea of equality or equity, and to get to equity, you first have to see how people are interrelated, right? And then, well, that gets to equality. And then the equity part is making room for those differences to also have space there. And that takes collaboration. And I think that's so important in the creative arts world as well. Anyone else want to share? That was beautiful, thank you.
I just thought of a simple thing. Can everybody hear me? Am I loud enough?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I just simply thought I need to ensure that I'm letting my students know that it's not necessarily about what I want from them. It's that that their story and who they are is what's really paramount to their teaching and becoming teachers. They worry a lot about and even when I'm teaching a studio art class or a art education course or education course, they worry so much about what me wants, and I think I need to be even more clear, more explicit, saying that that's just, it's not about that.
That's also powerful. And I think go back to the white supremacy culture slide. I think my colleague Amy and I were in the same department, and that comment and these comments kind of remind us of how we are encountering that white supremacy culture framework every single day. Like for us, it's this tenure track, as non-tenure, tenure track professors. You have to internalize this if you're trying to get tenure within the academy, but also try to teach your students to not value you as the only thinker in this space. It's like, it's complex. Well, on one end, I have to buy into the system. On the other end, I'm trying to resist this system at the same time.
And I think I did that too in my own education so much that I'm now, the question number 4 made me think about that, where I don't know that early on, that was explicitly told to me, like, I want to hear from you, and where did you come from? So I really only in the last 5 years, realize that how valuable that is, you know, and so I think that, you know, hopefully, I have a feeling more people have experienced that, but I think that's really what I'm most hanging on to from this.
And in some cultures and communities, students don't know that they can be listened to. They have a voice, they have a unique voice, they have unique experiences, you know, but they don't know that they can be listened to, and they don't realize that they need to be listened to. Like, I think this is an educational system that we just keep shoving more information down your throat, and the whole, I think the paternalism, there's like, I'm the teacher, you're the student, go grab your bag and go put it over there and sit down here and listen to somebody throw more information down your throat, right? I've gotten pushback from students at Trexler, at Rao, where I came to teach, say, hip hop, or I came to teach theater for this 1 hour in partnership with this organization. And then I come and they're just like, whatever, you know, like, don't want to hear what I have to say. Because, you know, and I'm looking around and I'm listening to just the teachers that are gathering them to come to listen to me. And they're like, go get that, go put that down, go get it. And I'm like, how long today were they being yelled at like this, right? And so, you know, they got their opinionated and they're, you know, like, whatever, talk to the hand, you know, like, don't want to hear a word I have to say. I'm just another person up there that is just going, here, now you listen to me. And I found myself just going, okay, I see, you have a lot to say. Let's all sit down. And they're like, what? Sit down. Let's sit down. We're not gonna do hip hop today. I'm not gonna teach you anything today. Here's the subject, love. What does this mean? And then we're all having this amazing discussion, and everyone's listening, and everyone's talking, everyone's sharing, and everyone's just going, whoa, wait, I didn't think about it this way. And then all of a sudden, you know, by the end of the hour, they're like, don't go, you know? And I'm like, well, it's the end of the time. And they're just like, no, you know, but they really do thrive to be listened to. They just don't know and haven't really been put in that position to know that it was okay to be listened to and to actually have, like, share your view, because I know you're the future, right? You're our future, so let's see what you're thinking. Yeah, just those, like, open forums and discussions, just going, here, I'm putting this on the table, what do you have to say? And it's not even, like, disrespectful either, like, what you said, what did you say, you know, it's like everyone's just listening intently. And then the other person raises their hand, and like, they're raising their hand. I don't have to tell them to raise their hand. They're just respecting each other by listening to each other, and then they have something to say, and then they share it, and everyone's listening, and it's just beautiful, just giving them that permission.
And trusting the space, right?
Yeah.
Because
and
trusting them,
and
like,
holding
they
that space
can do it.
and
They
letting
can
them
do
know,
it.
absolutely, right?
They can do it. I say that all the time. Like, the young people I engage with, when we ask them questions to reflect on what does it mean, what does social identity or what does intersectionality mean to them, I mean, the conversation just goes, and they know how to share space. And I think, I think, you know, sometimes we don't, as adults, right, that trust or that vulnerability kind of gets pushed out of us in order for us to be better workers for capitalism, right? And the powers that be, right? But they're not there yet, which is beautiful. And like, I can learn from them as much as they can learn from me. And they teach me it's okay to be vulnerable and to just trust the space that it's going to do and regulate itself, because, you know, it's possible for humans to do that if we truly just trust the space and bring love at the center of the conversation. I think we're done. This was beautiful. Thank you.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. And thank you all for your contributions and for being vulnerable in this space and for sharing with us. It's my honor to introduce our next presenter, Flavia West, who is an artist and educator from the West Coast. She flew out last night or this morning at 2 a.m. So we're just so happy to have you here. Flavia is also the founder of the Adding Voices Conference, which is coming up next November at Moore College of Art. So please make sure you check that out. And we're going to continue these conversations, but it's a great segue into thinking about how we center the learner. And Flavia is going to help us think about that and give us some tips and tools for incorporating culturally responsive teaching into our pedagogy and our practice. So I'll turn it over to you, Flavia.
I'm going to plug in, so I have a feeling as a teacher I'm going to say, go to the restroom if you need to go to the restroom.
And grab our coffee and cookies.
Can you hear me? Does that work? Yeah. I naturally speak pretty loud. What's up? Vibing. No? Higher up? Better? So lapel situation. All right, well, that gets started. Hi, everybody. It is so nice to be here today. Again, my name is Flavia West. I'm an art teacher. I teach middle school art. I started off teaching elementary school, but way before that, I was in museums. My introduction to the East Coast was NYU for graduate school in museum studies, and that's where I think I didn't realize it, but I think I wanted to teach art somewhere in between those two moments inside of it. I would say, turn it over. That's not cute. All right, I'm an aesthetic person, people. Not sorry. Okay, so today we're going to talk about cultural responsive teaching, but I just want to share a little bit about my journey. I attended an independent school that I now teach at, so I'm an alum. I teach at the Harvard Westlake School in Los Angeles, California. I was one of very few students of color in that classroom. So my perspective in how I teach is being one of the few in the room, being the one who never saw themselves reflected. So I'm intentionally in that space to take care of the Black and brown children in that space and the kids of the global majority, to right the wrongs that I experienced in that space, like just unapologetically. And I teach also at a special place, like, you know, the whole world went crazy over DEI the moment our second civil rights revolution started happening, right, with Black Lives Matter. But we have affinity spaces at my school. It is a predominantly white school, and then our next largest population is Asian, and then Black. But we have affinity spaces. We have a Black teacher caucus, so I teach in a special place, and that's important to say out loud. And I have a department chair who's a person of color who also happens to be queer, which is why I can do the work and say the things that I say inside my classroom, because so many places aren't safe. All right, so our time together. I'm gonna move around a lot, it's just how I roll. Just, you know, like buckle up, we're taking a ride, make sure that you have some things to write with and whatnot, so you can also be thinking, we're gonna simmer, we're gonna chat. Okay, so community norms, that is essential to building our classroom. So right now, I teach 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, okay, at an independent school. So what does that mean? My 7th graders, I have them for a year, and I teach a little bit of everything. So that's sculpture, painting, graphic design, photography, printmaking, video art, ceramics, like all of it. Like they get a little taste of it throughout the year. We're very lucky. I have a big budget. I always put that out there because it looks different depending on where you are. That's real. That's privilege inside of just where you teach. You have to own that. Makes a difference. Because young teachers will come to me and be like, how did you do that? I'm like, hold on, well, let's talk about it. What do you teach? What's your budget? Because your budget changes things that happen and how you have to work through problems as an art teacher. That's very real. Okay. And then we're going to talk about honoring our foremothers. So often we talk about cultural responsive teaching and pedagogy, and we don't talk about the Black women who are the reason for this. So we're going to do that, and you're going to know their faces. and we're gonna keep going. All right. I always like to start with this quote by Bell Hooks. It's really, really important to me. If you don't know Bell Hooks, read everything by Bell Hooks, like Bell. Just period, punto final, done, like just Bell. Okay, art is now perceived differently than before. It is seen as a vehicle for change, as a force that can break down the boundaries of inequalities so that people of color and the poor are denied access to art for the fear that if they get their hands on it, they'll write their own stories and understand the value of their lives. Let's expand on that to not just art, but education as a whole. So this is what we're getting into today. Welcome you to being uncomfortable. Welcome to me being unapologetically who I am. It's gonna be great. Cool, okay, so the first thing we gotta do is co-create some norms, right? This looks like, and I'm gonna show you what this looks like inside of my classroom with my middle school art students, okay? So that means not hanging a poster on the wall. That doesn't mean you come in and you start being a police officer inside of your classroom. The reason why the kids feel that way is not only because they're police officers in that classroom, it's because you're policing them. Do you like being policed? You're grown. Do you like people telling you what to do? It didn't change. It's the same thing when they're young people in a classroom where you say, it's your space, but it's really not actually. Right? So the key things inside of this are collaboration and communication. If this work is new to you, and even if it is not new to you, I highly recommend reading Zaretta Hammond's book, Culture Responsive Teaching and the Brain. I reread this and it has a workbook inside of it so you can sit through and work through it, that you can sit with yourself and revisit yourself. If you're not revisiting yourself as a teacher, it's something that I heard earlier, which I really loved. It's like you should be uncomfortable, you should be growing, it's consistent progress, it's consistent work to be changing, to be evolving. If you don't want to evolve anymore, I'm sorry, get out of the classroom, go somewhere else, don't be with the kids. If you don't want to do that work. Okay, so I'm gonna ask this to you, and this is also what it looks like inside of my classroom. How can we make this classroom, or the space that we're in right now, a safe space for sharing ideas with one another? How can we make sure everyone feels respected in this space? And what does that look like? So tell me, how are you gonna feel respected in this space so we can start having some real dialogue and like digging? What is it gonna look like? What do you need to feel safe in this space? Any takers?
For everybody to have an open mind.
I love that, open mind. What else would be great? I teach middle school, I just lean into the silence. I'll do the walk too. Ooh, it's good for Loris. What else? What else do you need to feel safe?
Classroom environment.
What about the classroom environment? Be more specific.
I've noticed that instead of the plain traditional white room, now we have lights, we have music.
Ooh, okay, so the setting.
Students are more open to discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so like set the tone, make a mood. My students say art class is a mood. I love that. I'm like, it is a mood. Stay forever. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here because you gotta go to class. But like anytime the other time, come in, the door's open. Okay, so I would also, yeah, please.
Not just being listened to, but being heard.
Being heard. Have you ever experienced where you're talking to someone and then they were just waiting to just tell you what they wanted to say?
Yeah.
No, thank you. So let's not do that, okay? And how about, I like speaking from the I perspective, because my lived experience is different than your lived experience, even if we share experiences, ethnicities, and different forms of our identities together. Can we all agree to that? Like thumbs up, heads like yes, be cool. Great. All right, so this is literally what I ask the kids, okay? And what I want you to ask yourself, if you are leading a workshop, if you are hanging out with just your own colleagues, I highly suggest to bring in community norms into your department meetings. Now you take care of how you talk to each other. Why? Because the same experiences that our children often have inside the classroom, we experience that same violence as teachers of color, as Black people, just inside of our spaces. All the time. And when someone wants to tell you, like, I should have said this in the faculty meeting, you're like, you should have said it out loud. Don't tell me now, I'm offended. That's not being an ally. I want you to be a co-conspirator with me. I want you to feel the risk that I feel every day, speaking my mind and being my full self. And we need to also think, how can we fill each other's cups? How do we care for one another? How can we make this a fertile place for growth and learning in our classroom? That's what we want, right? oftentimes when we talk about like, what do you love about teaching? Everyone's like, I love the joy, I love the kids, I want them to grow. But does your room really look like that? Does it actually feel that way? Is a very different question, right? Like if you're actually preparing to grow something, if you're actually preparing to have a garden, you gotta love that garden, you gotta water it. And folks don't be watering things. They're just telling everything that should go into rows, right? They're just organizing, they're not watering. Okay, so the benefits of community norms. And my girl said it. Is that Camille? Yeah. She was like, I asked them what did they think. Ask their opinion. So the start of the school year, what do I ask my kids? I go, okay, so usually when you come into the classroom, what do you experience? And they're like, I don't know. And I was like, everyone's been talking at you all the beginning, the first couple of days of school, huh? They're like, non-stop. I'm like, so annoying, huh? They're like, yeah. Cool. And I was like, and did everyone tell you their rules? And they're like, yeah. Right? These are 12-year-olds. They know exactly what's going on, okay? And they go, yeah. I said, cool. I said, I don't do that here. What? Yeah, we're making the rules together. And our rules are going to be the rules that we're going to live in. We're going to call them community norms because we are in community. If you didn't know, we in community. We stuck with each other for the whole year, so you better like it, you better work it out. You gotta work it out. We're in community with each other, okay? So then I'm in community with you. So I'm going to tell you and ask you questions of what do you think I need, right, from you, and vice versa. What do you need from me? I teach in a very academically rigorous school. I'm not about that grind culture. I experienced it, I lived it. I still remember the stress. I'm grown, I still remember the stress. That's problematic. That's called trauma, but don't worry, I worked through it. Therapy is wonderful. And the point is, as much as I do love my institution, because I'm back in my institution, the beauty of asking those questions to those children is key. So they're like, I want you to honor the due date or work with me with the due date if I want to work harder on my piece. Done. Cool. Can you not assign it like the night before? Why people be doing that to children? That's just rude. Or grown adults. Like, you want me to be your student, but you're not actually going to make time for me to like take in the information and make the most out of my education? How rude. How dare you? It's rude. Okay, so self-discipline. They do it themselves. Like, you're not minding those norms. So-and-so's not minding the norms. It's up on the board, right? Like, they know when they make those choices, right? You're talking over, you didn't clean your workspace. And I said, I don't want you to police each other. I want you to kindly remind each other. How can you do it so you're not acting like your mom right now and annoyed? And you're like, I'm like, yeah, be nice to mom, but you need to handle your space, right? How do we work in this space? Okay, and co-creation. It means that I care what you have to say, right? I don't do icebreakers. I'm not like, what's your favorite ice cream like? I would like you to authentically tell me those things. I know there's a lot of text. I'm probably going to move past this one and I'll come back. All right, this is the reflection, and then I'm going to read it to you. Does that sound good? Just go with me, flow with me. Cool. All right, what does safety look like? How does it feel? What colors and textures are present? I want you to describe a time for yourself. I want you to reflect on it or write it down where you did not feel safe in a classroom. Yeah, side note, we get into our feelings now. That's why we do the norms. You don't have to share yet. Describe a time when you did not feel safe in the classroom. And for my higher ed folks, for my professors, that means also when you're teaching. Because I can name many times where I don't feel safe in the classroom, I have not before. If you're an artist where you didn't feel safe talking about your work before, it exists for all of us. It's real. It's uncomfortable. And it's going to hit upon multiple points of our identities. Yeah? So I want you to think and feel that while I read this to you. Alrighty, Amalia Mesa Vines. Even then, I saw art as a kind of a doorway one enters, which can lead to freedom. Sometimes people try to keep the door shut and you have to bang to get in. Sometimes people shove through the door so that you're sure that you can go there. Unfortunately, in high school, I didn't get along with my art teachers because they wanted me to make work in a certain kind of way. I didn't want to do it. I vividly remember one of my teachers marking up my image to show me how to do it correctly. I tore it up and left the class. Of course, I was sent to the office for being rude to the teacher, and I kept saying, but he was rude to me. He marked on my drawing. No one thought that I had that kind of authorship yet, so it was not mine. I always ask permission if I can show you something, and I bring a piece of paper next to my students. I never put my stuff on their stuff. That's like talking over someone. Right? That's like a dance, like, I don't like that choreo, do it like this. Like, well, why? What are we saying with our bodies? Why is that? I'm a child of dancers. That makes sense. Okay. All right, so our four mothers, if you didn't know, here they are. They're incredible. They're fantastic. That's Loretta Hammond. That's Janine Gay. That's Dr. Gloria Lanson Billings. If you're an art ed student, you're like, Lanson Billings! Like, she's amazing. All of this. And if you don't know, well, now you know. Now you know. Yes? Cool. These women are exceptional Black women who have changed and altered education. Their names are not said enough, their faces are not known enough. Cite Black women at all times. Thank you. Are you having a good time? You okay? I bring lunchtime energy. I know. That's good. Okay, so I want you to reflect right now. What opportunities are you providing students to teach about who they are? Say it again. What opportunities are you providing students to teach you about who they are? How does what your students share inform your curriculum choices? You want to sit with that. Let's chew. It'll give you a few minutes. The reason why I think it's important to sit and write in our heads first is because you have to do internal work before we do that work with one another as a community in this space, let alone with our students. The same way that you're like psychotically or anxiously focusing on, what do you want to say, your project, the example, you need to be doing that internal work with self. Does anybody need more visual time to write? Okay. So I always like to share real examples. So I kept thinking about this, and I'm not an art educator by like, I don't know, school. Does that make sense? Like I happen to. So both of my parents are educators. I never wanted to be an educator. My brother never wanted to be an educator. Guess what we are? Educators. It's a calling. It is a vocation. It's a calling. And so I was, let's see, I went to school here in Chicago, right, for fiber material studies and drawing and painting. And then I was like, how do I make money doing this thing? How do I do this? So now I was in a museum education program at the Art Institute, right? And they were like, cool, you're going to teach and whatnot. And I was like, what? Okay. And they're like, yeah, you're going to teach from the collection. And I was like, all right, bet, I'll teach from the collection. Like, let's do it. Cool. And then I learned how to make thematic work, right? Like how to connect thematic work. So that's how I entered teaching. Now people were like, this is profound. Like, why profound? They're doing it in the museum, like right over here in this institution, they're doing it here. Why are we doing it over here? Like, why are we waiting for the one day for the field trip with all things, or if you can even have a field trip, to do that with our students? Right? You can do it every day, building thematic work, right, inside of your curriculum. Okay, so that was like my aha moment. And then I was like, how do I do this? And I started talking to people, all of them were white, of course. And I was like, well, how do you do this? How do you do this? And they're like, what you need to do is become a PhD and like figure out what you want to be. And I was like, don't go into the Renaissance, so pick something else. I was like, why would I do the Renaissance? And I love you, the Renaissance. My daughter's name is Artemisia. Like, okay. Yeah. But Artemisia Gentileschi is our first female Renaissance painter that we know. And usually everyone just cites the Ninja Turtles, you know? So always remember it. If you remember the Ninja Turtles, kids like that too. It's relevant right now. Write that down. Don't do the Star Wars things unless you've watched the recent movies. You date yourself. Okay, so I started looking out for you, I'm looking out for you, I'm trying to help you find moments of connection. You have to be authentic, right? If it's not you, don't do it. Kids can smell it. You watch that, or you watch it, you think it's not good. Again, I teach middle school. I play with you. Okay, so I started asking myself, what is the desert if I want my classroom to be the oasis? Right? When Hooks talks about safety, which talks about love, right? If I want my classroom to be that space, how do I do that? The outside's the desert, right? Where there's being police walking around, and art, because for me, art's that moment of pure, beautiful freedom, right? And meditation. It's beautiful. That's why we got into this, right? Do you remember? Like how art made you feel the first time? Yeah. That's what they're coming in with. And so then when you think about when you squash it and only do it this way, only do it that way, only these colors, only rules, like. And then all of us spend time trying to go back to our old ways of creating when we were children. Like we're trying to find that all over again as artists. Okay, so I put this up on the board with my kids. This was a couple years ago. And I said, all right, where's your oasis? Like, what's a desert, right? And they were like, okay. So I started defining this for myself. It's arid, right? Sparse vegetation, right? Devoid of life. Desolate. Okay? And so then it's like, where's your oasis? Where's the desert in your workplace is what I want you to think about. We all got one. You know exactly where's a desert in your workplace where you're like, you don't want to go there. You're like, you avoid, you walk around that department member, everybody's got one. You're like, oh, it's them. So we have to teach students how to carry oasis with them. How do you carry safety with you, right? Especially our black babies, our brown babies, even our Asian babies. Like, I only speak from my own perspective, so that's why I don't include that, but that's absolutely there in the global majority and so often forgotten. Okay. So I asked them, how can the classroom be an oasis? And this was my sketchbook prompt for my kids at the beginning of the year. And I said, I'm using the word oasis, so we don't say the word sanctuary, because sanctuary also then gets into some like religious undertones and things. I don't know how you deal with that, you know. And our kids are cool, they're like, we get you. And I'm like, cool, okay. So we defined. So I said, all right, so what's sanctuary, right? And I found this manifesto, because I'm always reading it all the time. And how can sanctuary be created, right? And how can it be protected? So there's this whole manifesto. And I'll make sure to get like a back end, I'll send it to Stacy, because I was like, I gotta feel the room before I make the handout. I'm that person. I'm that teacher. I switch it. It's different for every single class, like that's who I am. All right, so it's called the Sanctuary Manifesto, okay? It's by Press. Okay, so we're zooming in. So this is written, this is co-written, what's beautiful is by people who are seeking sanctuary. Keep going. What is sanctuary? How can it be created? How can it be protected? 1, sanctuary is not yet an experience, it is the horizon. Sanctuary is safety, the actions you take to create safety, and a process towards healing. Sanctuary is protection. So they're reading this, we're reading this, we're vibing. I'm doing this analysis, okay? And so what they come away with is I first asked, what does that mean to you? How do you create it yourself, okay? And so I said, how do you create sanctuary? Where do you feel the safest? And they're like, my music, right? I need my music. I was like, I get that. I need my playlist. My playlist is essential. They're like certain pens and pencils, sketchbook, start naming the things, right? And everyone's got, I don't care what medium you're in, the photographers here where you can taking pictures, which like, thank you so much. You know, like same thing, like you got your lens, you got the preferred bag, you got all your stuff if you were able to. Ballpoint pen, everybody note taking. I like a G2 Pilot pen, it's very specific when I'm vibing, which is different than when I'm drawing. And I like a 6B pencil, even though most people say 2B. I'm like, it's a 6B. Sorry, 6B. Okay, so I asked them, I said, I want you to reflect on oasis. I want you to show me what oasis looks like to you, and then what's the opposite? Where's the desert? And this is what they came up with. So 2-page mixed media sketchbook on the teacher land of things. What do I want to see? I want to see a diptych, right? I want to see you combine 2 pages together. I want you to transform the sketchbook and think of it as art object, right? How do you do that? And so these are their, examples. Okay. And I asked for at least like 1 to 2 mediums. Some people could do it, some people couldn't. This is me getting to know them. This is authentic, understanding them at the different levels of culture. Okay. A culturally relevant curriculum is one that acknowledges the linkages between schooling and culture and is committed to collective empowerment. That means every single student, not like just a few of them or some of them that you like. I know that one kid who annoys you. You gotta love him too though, or her, or them. Okay? And joy is the key to that. Joy, Charles. I was waiting to answer your question when I was up here. I was listening to you. I'm like, what is it? And I was like, I think it's joy. That's what I lean into. It's radical joy. Because all we see is pain. All we see is suffering. All we consistently give and show is sadness. And that's not the entirety of the human experience. You know that, I know that. That's not the entirety of the Black experience, I can tell you that for sure. There's joy up in my house. I'm a biracial person. I'm Afro-Latina, so like, you know, my mama, there's joy in the house. There's music in the house. There's like liveliness and love where I grew up. It's not all this sadness and we do. Okay, so why culture? Culture guides how we process, and this is from Hammond's, okay? Hammond. Culture is our brain's software, okay? Regardless of your race, your ethnicity, everyone here has a culture. Cultural information turns everyday happenings into meaningful events. I'm not going to tell you all of it, I'm just doing like a review because you got to read the book. Okay, there's 3 types of cultures if you didn't know. Surface, shallow, and deep. Okay, surface culture is usually what happens in all the, I'm unapologetic, all the really bad lessons that I see up on Pinterest. I said it. Not sorry. They're awful, okay? Yeah, it's like food, music, holidays, it's things that can be seen and heard, right? It's where, it's fall. It's fall. You know what's coming, everybody, right? I'm gonna see sugar skulls. But they'll have no connection to the depth of ancestry or telling cultural stories of death and ancestry and telling stories so I can remember my foremothers and my forefathers and like all my ancestors to know the depth of how we got here and the meaning, right? Some teacher's is gonna tell me there's some flowers and put some hearts on it. It's a sugar skull, it's so cute. It's different than Halloween, but it's not. Next, Frida Kahlo. Oh, you gotta say that too, Frida Kahlo. Please pick somebody besides Frida Kahlo. Okay. Shallow culture. The unspoken rules, everyday norms, personal space, for example, how you treat your elders. Yeah? Eye contact. Oftentimes I find that people say certain kids don't make eye contact with me. And then other kids are like, why are they making eye contact with me? It's cultural. It's what it's like in your home. Makes a difference. Lots of assumptions. Now, who are the majority of art teachers? White women. So that means you're assuming oftentimes, right, a complete different cultural interaction. Right? Some children are taught not to look at their parents in the eyes. It's like this. And I'm like, they're actually showing you a sign of respect. What you want to do is elevate them to be like, you can look at me. I want to hear what you're saying. Right? Or it's look at me when I'm talking to you. Child, look at me when I'm talking. See, everyone feel right there. Like baby, like yes. Like your full head turn body adjustment. So I often say, like, when you want to talk to me, could you all turn your body so it's facing like I used to teach elementary, that makes sense. Okay, deep culture, okay? That's the intense emotional impact on trust. How we learn, how it affects our everyday behaviors, how we make sense of the world, decision making, how we interpret gender roles. Stacey, can I ask you a question? Can we like slightly turn that like a tiny bit so that they can't see? Thank you. I appreciate it. Turn this straight. I was gonna get up in there and then I was like, don't break something. No. You can't buy it. I cannot buy it. Alright. Knowing if a student prefers teamwork over individual work, right? It's also like competition, how they interact, ethics, right? All that's coming inside a deep culture. What I mean by that, and what Hammond shows us, is that there's levels. So we're seeing a tree, artists, okay? Tree. The leaves on the top, and I'm not trying to disrespect the tree, we need the leaves, okay? Like we need flowering plants and things like that. We're not going there yet. I'll talk deep about how we need to honor the land in a minute. But surface culture, right? So that's up on top. Observable patterns, low emotional impact on trust. Now as artists, I just want to ask you, when you're in your sketch, how many people share their sketchbook?
What do you mean, like our personal?
Yeah, your personal sketchbook. How many of you just are all showing your personal sketchbook all the time?
I'm a doctorate student, so I don't get to make sketchbooks right now, but for myself.
But before, it's personal, right? You gotta know somebody. You gotta trust somebody to share your art. I'm also a dancer. I don't dance with everybody. This is my body. This is my vessel. It's also my soul. Not everyone gets the right to touch me or interact with me and my body as it flows through space. Don't ever touch my hair, period. So don't ask about it, don't just like leave it alone, just don't. Also that piece is fantastic. I'm loving this. Okay, it's carved by the way. Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, so then shallow culture, unspoken rules, high emotional impact on trust. So we're starting at the top, songs, holidays, cooking, talk styles, dance, hairstyle, music, language, art. Don't get offended that art's up there. We know it goes deep. You have to do that work. Don't leave it up here at the top. Okay. Then concepts of time, acceptable food sources, eye contact, personal space, ways of handling emotions, the nature of relationships, the tempo of work, nonverbal communication, child-rearing principles, honesty, theories of wellness and disease. And then let's go down, we're at the roots now. Everybody with me? Deep culture, collective unconscious beliefs and norms, intense emotional impact on trust. Okay, is this familiar to everybody? Because I can just, okay, yes, I believe so. Okay, cool. Okay, I know what needs to be. Okay, so decision making, concepts of self, worldview, definitions of kinship and group identity, concepts of power and spirituality. Power, right? Our ladies before we're talking about power. Power is so important in the classroom. Hoax tells us how important that is, right? Okay, so that power piece, that's why we do community norms, because we're starting to equalize the power. Does that make sense to everybody? That's why. Okay, the same way why I ask your artistic input when you're making your art, because it's an aspect of power. If I tell you what to make, it's my art piece, it's not your art piece. Oh great, it looks like mine. No. Do I have any TAB teachers in the room? People who teach for artistic behavior? That's the jam. Choice-based learning. That's where you want to like find your way. Some people are all choice, some people are like a little bit, I'm like choice-based, I would say. I know some people who are full tab, some of my good friends, I'm like, it makes me too nervous, I can't freak out. It's okay. All right, keep going. All right, so cultural archetypes. So this also helps us understand individualism versus collectivism, right? The emphasis of the importance of relationships, interdependence. Emergent strategy, anybody? AJ Marie Brown? Emergent strategy. Look into it and write it down. Emergent strategy. Thank you. And that's important. Emergent strategy is important. What we're talking about is learning from nature, interdependence, that we need one another. Is anybody a nerd about mushrooms and the mycelial network? Yes. I'm a weirdo, of course. Love it. All right. So individualism is what's emphasized in the United States. You ladies were talking about it. I consider it like, or I often refer to it as a master narrative, like the American dream, right? Like, okay. And I'm a daughter of an immigrant, proud. But like this idea of individualism, that you do it all by yourself. No, you don't. You did it all by yourself. You fed yourself, took care of yourself, made sure you lived in a safe space, woke up fed, etc., got to school, etc., right? You did not do that alone. That's your family. So we can keep tracing back to different levels of privilege, right? And in our classroom, the collaborative work is where we're teaching them that interdependence is essential to our survival, literally as like a human species. We'd be in trouble if we did not know. Like Earth is just not it. Okay, so again, internal work. That's why we're here right now, is me telling you in the most loving kind of way, I'm still doing internal work, I am not done yet. If this is it, like, she needs to ascend like 3 more levels. Okay? So as educators, we need to talk and think about these questions. Okay, this is the write it down part. I'm good like that. I hate when teachers don't tell you like to write that part down. Write it down! Okay, I usually also have it on the board for my kids, so like, okay. So what is culture? What is my culture, right? What is my culture? You need to ask yourself that. What is your culture? What is your identity? And where is their privilege? What do those terms mean for me as an educator and for my students? How does this impact my students' perspectives and experiences? It looks different. So for example, I have a lot of privilege in many ways, and in many ways I don't, sorry. For example, both of my parents are college educated. So am I. So is my brother. So my parents were able to help me through the college process. Get this, my dad ended up being a head of school, but before that he was a college counselor. I was in good hands. Okay. I attended private school. I was a scholarship kid. That's because mom and dad worked at those schools. They put me in there. My mom used to work at LUAG, and then she's like, what do the other kids have? Oh, everything and all the money? Okay, baby's going there. Those are choices to move me outside of my community. I would call that a disadvantage that happened to me, even though I experienced a lot of privilege. Let's keep going. Your religion, sexual orientation, all those things can give you lots of privilege. Real talk, and it's okay. If you're a white man in this room right now, you've got a lot of privilege. It's okay. But you do. The question is, what are you doing with it? How are you walking in this world with it to push yourself back and to be mindful of others who don't? I'm mindful of how I walk through space. My day yesterday was awful. It started with an unhoused man yelling at me, calling me lots of like inappropriate words, and throwing water bottles at my car because I was just trying to talk to my mom before I was like going to work. And I was feeling mom guilt because I was leaving my children to come here. They're good though. But like, anyway, my point is how we move through space matters, right? Okay. You ready? Relationships are more important than any of the content you are teaching. Relationship, relationship, relationship. When you know about their game, when you know about what they do outside of school, that matters, because that means you see me more as student B in the class. You see me as Flavia, who takes dance class and really loves it, and you're going to come to my dance production, right? Like, cool, thanks, teach. Right? I care about you, the person. And Hammond talks about this equation: rapport plus alliance equals cognitive insight. The brain, literally, she's talking about science, y'all. Thank you. We love science. We love science and Black Lives Matter and land back. Cool. So the brain feels safest and relaxed when we are connected to those we trust and treat us well. The norms aid us in building a classroom of communal care. And we all know that we need communal care literally inside the world right now. How are they going to learn that if it's not in your classroom? You are teaching much larger things than just art. Art can be used for communal care. But like, you teach them life skills. Also, I love it to watch all the, like when they paint, because I teach painting, is to watch someone have a spill and watch the spill run over the table. And then I just stand there and I watch it and they're like, it's spilling. I'm like, I know. What should we do? Middle school, it's like usually the first 2 weeks, so like I just started, so like, yeah, okay. So it finally happened, and they're like, what should we do? Paper towels are located over here. You know, sponge situation, they're like spreading the paint with the sponge, right? You're watching the whole thing go down. I'm like, but they figured out that's a life skill. Their parents love that back to school. They was like, oh yeah, it was great. They're like, I was like, baby can clean though. Don't let them lie to you. They know how to clean. Because you're not getting the next material if you don't clean up your workstation, because that's part of our community norms. And I don't feel cared for as a teacher to bring in more materials if you're not doing that part. Communal care. So to learning partnership. Each part is essential, a stepping stone. Affirmation, mutual respect, and validation. If all you hear is that what you're doing wrong, was that great? You can think back to your childhood on this. No, I'm not a therapist, so I'm not capable of doing more than that. But like, If all you're hearing is what you're doing wrong and there's no moment of praise, think about that if you were also someone who is a department chair. If you're a lead in your team, it goes deeper than that. If you're a parent. Books even tells us that, we have the opportunity to undo oppression, but we first must start with ourselves. If we cannot do that within ourselves and in our own homes, then how can we ever think that we can do that inside of a classroom setting, right? I catch myself all the time. Why? Because I'm remembering the past where I'm like, you better, and I'm like, rephrase that, find a better way to say that to the kids, to my own children. Okay. Could you please, right? Think about it and how I sound. Because if I'm only policing you, why do you want to be home? Why do you want to be in the classroom? Okay, so what can it look like in the museum or in the classroom, okay? Dialogue. Hi, so-and-so, say their name. So in the museum or in the classroom, I both am. Greetings and checking in. How are you today, right? That's SEL, that's when we're thinking about the social emotional learner, like the check-in. And then I hear teachers, even at my school, they're like, I don't have time for that, I gotta get to the content. The relationships are more important than the content. Because if I don't feel safe, my brain is in flight or fight mode. And that's all I'm thinking about. I've been recently reading some books again, and she was talking about how professors were telling her that she should stop, like she should leave. I'm like, you had the audacity to tell Bell Hooks to stop. And I just heard Dr. Bettina Love's speech, and she said the same thing, that someone was like, this isn't for you, college isn't for you. And they're so profound. Okay, and curriculum, okay, what does that look like? Choice-based and narrative, personal narrative. It's so great that you can make a perfect looking flower. What are you saying with it? You can do it in everything. Perfect photograph. Ooh, the dancer, it's like, that's beautiful, you can do all those fouettes. I love it, yes, you got the splits. What are you saying with your work and your body? Depth. We look at them and we get annoyed that they're sitting there doing like, I don't know, back in the day it was Kirby, but like whatever, Pokemon, whatever like young children are into, that's what they're into. But what does it make you feel like? Take them to the next step. Like, why is it that you love, like Daniel Tiger, what else is up right now? Ninja Turtles, right? Like, why do you love the Ninja Turtles so much? And you're like, I don't know, they're so cool, blah, blah, but like, they're brothers, they spend time together, they, you know, like, they're different, but everyone accepts them. There's the depth, right? Or why the Ninja Turtles? Even if I really just want to talk about how that's like Leo and Donnie from back in the day, like, right? But I'll get there. Have you seen those t-shirts where they have the masks? Okay, critique. How we discuss art in relationship to an artist's ideas. They don't like become an artist because I show up. That's the banking method that Camille was talking about, right? Like forever I'm just like, oh, I bestow all knowledge upon you. You are so lucky to be in my presence. Everyone's had a professor like that. Was that a great experience for you? No. Okay. So instead, I can learn from them and they can learn from me, right? We're learning. That's what makes me a better teacher. I was telling him, I was like, yeah, well, what else do you do? And I was like, when I'm not like momming and like living life and being a person, they're like, yeah, what else do you do? And I was like, well, I make art. They're like, what else do you do? And I was like, oh, I guess I go teach other teachers. That's pretty cool. And then you go teach other teachers? And I was like, I do. And I like that. You're the reason why I teach other teachers though. And I tell them that because it's true. Because I find myself wanting to put my wants or my, bless you, wants on that, right? Where I'm like, could you do it this way? Why? And I'll give you an example of it later. And I had to step back and realize where my power was and how I was using it. It doesn't stop. Okay, and I always tell them your art is in conversation with the world, right? The whole world when you make this. And you may not know or not, no one's maybe like come over and giving you like, hey, here's the special info, but it's there, right? That's like when you go to the art piece that has a dog center and they're all like, what is this? And you're like, no one let you in. Let me explain to you why the dot in the center is important and how that tracks it back, okay? But there are some conversation with the whole world. It's not just this little thing that we did that's like window dressing for our classroom or for the school, right? We are not frosting. Your job is more than teaching the elements of art. My goodness. And sketchbook prompts, right? That's your space. That's the oasis. You can take it with you. It comes and goes into your classroom, right? That's where you can understand them with prompts, right? That's where their deep culture comes out and you're not even aware of it at times. It's beautiful. They're not aware. Okay, examples, because I'm an example person, because I don't like going to PD without having actual stuff to take back. It's so annoying. You're like, great, I have all these ideas. I'm going to sit and contemplate that while I'm doing Sunday scaries, getting ready to wake up. I teach like full time. I was like, what are you doing? I'm a full-time teacher. I don't know. Anyway. Okay, so my goal, I don't tell them this is my goal. Okay, my goal is learning about my students, right? What are they passionate about? What inspires them and something that scares them, right? I'm trying to get to know who they are. So my goal is like, I'm trying to get some deep culture moments, right? Like trying to sift through. What I tell them is that first we're gonna do a mind map, okay? So write down what you're passionate about and what inspires you. Hey, we can do this now. Okay, go ahead. So write down a couple of things you're passionate about and what inspires you, or hold it in your head. And then something that scares you. Okay. This is when usually someone's like, I'm freaked out by spiders. Miss EW is like a no-go for me. And I'm like, arachnophobia for real, but that's not what I'm talking about. Dig a little deeper. I'm gonna look at you because you're seeking vulnerability, but have yet to be vulnerable. You're asking children to open up their whole world to you and then you like hold back. That does not mean overshare your whole life. Like, no, adult, appropriate, but still. So when I introduce it, I share mine. Right? And I share openly. So I say something like, what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about my children. I'm passionate about art. I'm passionate about dance and nature and living. That's what I'm passionate about. I said, do you want to know what I'm scared of? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, they're like, well, you said spiders. I'm like, yeah, but I'm scared of something way bigger than that. And they're like, what? And I said, my children not remembering me or the lessons I teach them. And And they're like, I was like, I know, I just went deep. She's like, you went so deep. I'm like, I went so deep, I know. And they're like, oh. Yeah. It's like, that's like a real fear. It's like spiders are like over here. That's in the gut. And they're like, got it. I'm like, okay. I was like, you don't have to share that with everybody. We're gonna figure out how we symbolize that though. They have a right to privacy. Yeah. I also tell them about their sketchbook. Now what I'm looking for in an art teacher, positive negative space, conceptual art, line and value, symbolism, layering, and the elements and principles of art. I know what I'm doing, but there's a larger story for them, and that's the narrative, right? This is my art teacher land, like they need to care, but that's not the same thing. Right? Okay. So this is what their work looks like. I always forget to reference the artist when I do this, so her name is Swoon. If you look her up, S-W-O-O-N. If you're all familiar because you're East Coasters usually with the word. If you Google Swoon real quick or look up on your phones, that's fine, I'm not offended. I think we learn in multiple formats. Okay, so I have my kids, so here are the two pieces. So the things that they were afraid of need to be on brown paper. And what I was looking for was like a little bit of line work and understanding value. With me, right? Like that's what I'm looking for as a team, okay? And symbolism. And then on the other side, what's the paper cutout is what they were passionate about. Okay, and then my color theory moment was like, okay, like pick 2 colors you like, we'll do like a little intermediate color moment, like let's use a non-traditional tool like a squeegee. There we go. So that was background. Okay, they had to sift through that. So this is where the stories, because they write artist statements and they talk about their work and critique. I have some good friends, a very good friend in Connecticut, and she teaches like the littles, like kindy and up. They've been writing artist statements. They can do it. Why are you holding out on them? Think about it. Someone asked you to write an artist statement when you were in kindy, and now you're grown. You'd be so good. It's right there. Okay, so she was telling me that this is part of her favorite song. This is Lucia. And she was talking about how much she loves to travel. So that's what's on top. And I was like, message in a bottle, right? And I'm not that old, but I was like, message in a bottle, right? Now she was like, I don't know if you're talking about Lucy. I was like, okay, I'll tell you though, embarrassing. Okay. And she was like, no, it's just a song and the way I think and the way I feel, and it's my song and my sketchbook, and it's like, it's me. It's just whenever I hear that song, I know that song. Okay, next. And then somebody else said, oh, I love my family, so that's represented by the tree, and I love ideas and new ideas, so it's a light bulb. And then the roots coming out from it. Yeah. Cool. And then the things that they're afraid of is secrets and not being let into things. Family things. These kids know. These are 12-year-olds. This is the beginning of the school year, not the end. It's them, it's not me. Okay, and then the other piece was the fear of time in the brown paper, and then Ohana and water. I love this kid. I worry about him a lot. He's about to graduate, so I don't see him anymore. But okay. So water polo is life. I teach at that type. So there's like water polo, and fencing, and he doesn't like homework and reading. Right? His parents are trying to stop him from playing water polo because they don't feel like that's going to get him into college. Okay? This is an Asian identifying student, particularly Korean American. Okay. Yeah, like me, so like first gen. Okay. And so he's talking about it. And what's he concerned about? What are his fears? These are real fears, y'all. That's the thing when you have, like when kids are going through the real stuff. Money, loss of love, and his parents' divorce. Since then, his parents have separated. Water polo is luckily back in his life. He was definitely struggling in school during the pandemic. So this is pre-pandemic work. But it was some hard times. And that's when people are like, well, how do you deal with that moment of trauma? How do you deal with the moments of the difficult things? And I'm like, and that's where you say what you're comfortable sharing. That's where you still know you're a mandated court reporter. Like, that's over here, right? You're there and present as much as you can. Alrighty, some other things. I talked about invisible walls and borders, right? When you can share your ideas when you can, right? Kids understand the concept of a border and like, a border's not real, someone just drew it, like that's my border. You done that with your sibling in a room. You're like, mine. Does not work. Try with your kids, it doesn't work out. Anyway, okay, so I asked them to be cartographers, I asked them to be map makers and to map themselves, to know themselves. right? So I gave this list of words and I asked them to do that. And so they picked sadness and calming, and then so they started kind of coming up with these ways, and she chose music in her commute to school in which to share that in her sketchbook. Another student, comfort, what's new, sadness, the void and the unknown. So in Teacherland, I was like, I need a compass rose. I need at least 3 regions. I need different materials, right, happening. But I need you to try and find a way to explain yourself without writing it. What does that look like? If you were different lands, what would it be? And I'm always using contemporary artists. Like I don't use the old dead. So here's some other examples of student work. I don't control their style at all. My job is to put tools in the toolbox and help your voice come out as an artist. That's my job. They get to pursue thematic work or how they're feeling. So these are kids post-pandemic coming back. And like anxiety, sleeplessness, right? Lost in between imagination and reality, wanting to escape all the time. I teach at a college prep school. They're stressed out. Those are older students. So this is these ones right here. This is 8th grade. Okay, this is 8th and 9th graders. The other ones were my babies, my 7th graders. Okay, collaborative work. Which goes back to community and communal care. I don't think we can care about community unless we're talking about the environment, because we are in community with the environment. Like, yo, we literally need trees to live, right? And we need clean water. So that's why. This affects especially how I teach painting, how we absolutely need the land, because the land is how we got pigments in the first place, right? So art history-wise, I'm like, oh, Lascaux, the caves, the Bloombo's caves, right? Like our painting history actually starts in South Africa. See how I talked about Africa without talking about Picasso? Why do you still need to teach him? Not that I don't appreciate him, they just know him. Okay. So I start talking about like what's happening in the world, what's relevant to you, right? And they're like, the world's on fire. I'm like, facts. Well, like they know this is 7th grade, okay? The world is on fire. This is the end of the year, which is important, and I'm also a drawing and painting teacher, 2 things that are important. Okay. So I had, I don't know, like 6 different classes together. They worked individually on paper, and then it's all collaged together. And we were talking about different environments in crisis. Okay. So, you know, tropical, and then the middle one is all indigenous plants from California. So that's where science is coming in. We're doing interdisciplinary. They're vibing. They also understand that we need pollinators, like the whole conversation is happening. Interdependence, right? And then I talked about, there's this really amazing person named Kia at Woke Kindergarten. Woke Kindergarten. And they are an incredible teacher who's an abolitionist kindergarten teacher, and they're amazing. And they talk about the classroom as an ecosystem. So instead of handing out classroom jobs, how can the classroom be an ecosystem? Like how can you care for the classroom and think about that collective care as if it's an environment? I just think was rad, so I've been like simmering on that in the background. Anyway, so these are the pieces that the kids did, and I collaborated with them. Like I'm the one who did the sweatshirts, right? Like I drew that out, and they helped me paint in. But everything else is them and their ideas and what it should look like. And this is where the pride, right? The collaborative, right? Because they're like, I want to do a group project. I'm like, I know it's a group project, but it's going to be okay. So solo group, nobody likes group project. So they all have their, it's true, nobody likes it, they just like, oh no, so this is how you, come on, I know, you see it, you know. I teach middle school, I teach middle school. Okay, so we do the group project, but everyone has their individual piece, and then it all comes together. And we know that moment when something comes together, like when the stew is made, when the soup is there, when it tastes good. It's exciting, right? So if you need to move or stretch your bodies, it does not offend me, please stand to be comfortable. Middle school. Okay, and then you guys have like the goat out here, Roberto Lugo. So I did a Roberto Lugo project with my kids, and this equally was then talking about culture, deep culture, understanding them and connecting them to artists who are alive that they can research, find on Instagram, get like all about, and then tell me things that I don't even know about them. Like, did you know that he has a show? And I'm like, I didn't know, tell me some more, like, right? They start being experts in things. So this one was, we started off with kind of thinking about icons, who's important to you, who hasn't been celebrated, right? Because that's something he focuses a lot inside of his work, okay? And perfect examples of what I was talking about before of like when you want to control what your students make. I'm like, why is Lisa Sims like what? And they were like, she's such a strong feminist icon of CW, this is all why. Boom, ba-doom, ba-doom, ba-doom. And I was like, you explained it. Artist statement, intent, critical consciousness. Okay, so these are decisions I want to make on it. Done. Make your pop. Okay, Michael Jordan, and some kids are like, do you know the other things about Michael Jordan? I'm like, okay, this is the moment. Love the art, hate the artist. I can tell you about all the artists that you know of, all the dead guys, you know, they're not great. But you know, and Albus Dumbledore, right? So then we're thinking about pattern, right? We're thinking about vessel. We're thinking about the communal aspect of what tea in a teapot means. Will you be sharing tea? Will you be pouring tea? Tea ceremonies. Lots of different ways to tea. Here's some other ones. I love that someone did Marsha P. It made me happy. And my kids feel safe to do that. I got lots of Swifties. No comment. About Beyonce, right? Anyway. But they did a wonderful job, right? And then so these are plaster, right? These are plaster working on top with an acrylic paint, yeah, and then Posca pens on top. Okay, that's the final detailing. And then those top pieces are made out of air dry clay that then got covered in Mod Podge, right? So they'd stay like solidified because you know if they fall, it's over. Then you got tears. Okay. So the way to connect to our students, Dr. Radine Sims Bishop, all right, talks about all the time, mirrors, windows, and sliding doors, right? I need a mirror so that I see myself reflected beautifully inside of the curriculum. I want to feel beautiful. I want to feel like my story matters. Right, as a student. Okay. And then for my friends, completely different than me, my classmates, that's a window for them to peer in and see my experience. Then there's a sliding door that because I've seen my mirror and I've gone through your window, I can open it. And that's why I want to go to the exhibit on X, Y, or Z thing, right? That's why it matters to me. That's why I'm like, oh, well, if I actively participate in undoing white supremacist culture, I'm actually doing collective care work, right? Because I'm caring for everybody, because everyone always prospers when Black women try to do things to help the world. Like, oh, cool, so I should be doing that, right? Those are my personal goals. We'll get there. But, so I talk about joy being so important. So often people talk about the injustices in the world, and they show pain and violence. Babies don't need more pain and violence. That can often be just like right at home. That's literally sometimes outside the door. They get like literally like cross over the threshold of school and they're in. Especially teach in like hardcore urban spaces. That's there. Just as much as there's love there, but those things coexist. They need more love. Okay. Back to powering and empowering. How do you empower your students? How do you discuss power in your classroom? This comes back to the norms, right? Power. Oftentimes, because of the heteropatriarchy, we think of only power over. There's power with. There's power to. So how do you talk about power? Right? When you start those community norms, they look at you all surprised, like, well, you get to make the rules. You're like, right, this is different. Like, I see, like, yes, it is different. So you see my overtime? No? Okay. All right. Things that you can change in terms of power. It's writing time. Wake up, wake up, wake up. You do it, drink some water, move your body, stretch the things, okay? It is not normal to be told to sit for this long. It's not normal. Like, it's not a common thing. It's just that we've been conditioned to think that we have to sit there like this because we were told that. Do the old school, like, Puritan ways, we'll do, like, move your body, stretch, yes, dancer, go. Like, have a moment, you know what I mean? Like, move, you know, like, I love it. Yes, I see you. That's beautiful, right? Like, stretch, move your body, stand up, walk around, like, you're fine. You'll know if you push a boundary. I'm real, I'll let you know. Kids know too. This is what I'm like with my students. I'm a very real person, right? Okay, so I have the power with. I have the power to. There's power within. I do this with my kids. I'm like, so we're talking about these community norms. What do we have the power to do with one another, right? What's your individual power that you have inside this classroom? What's our communal power together? What's their power within? Sometimes that directly connects to the art classroom, and that's inspire. Sometimes you're like, I have the power to help blah, blah, blah at home, or I have, right? Like, but again, the classroom and life should be able to actually like move in between each other. The way that we see these as separate things is an actual learning, right? So if you don't know any of these women, you get to know them. This is just my moment and my pause while I drink some water. You don't know Angela, Crenshaw, Lord, Collins, Walker, Morrison, Hooks, get up in there. It's not light reading. It's not light reading. And particularly I'm annoyed that Hooks, all the writing, like for whatever reason, they keep making the print super tiny small. And like, I'm just like, and again, like, I have their eyesight. Okay. Teaching's political. Okay. The process of empowerment cannot be simplistically defined in accordance with our own particular class interests. We must learn to lift as we climb. As teachers, we must learn to lift as we climb. The individual work, the community work. Yes? Inside the classroom, us as people. Okay. You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world. And you have to do it all the time. I'm also going to say you get to rest, particularly like you get to rest. Particularly like black and brown people, you get to rest. That's not all you can choose not to. The majority will be like, no, I'm good. That's somebody like, right? You can pick and choose that. You can step into it, you can step out. You can't carry that all the time. All the white co-conspirators, that's your work. It's your work. Thank you. Don't tell me you're sorry, just be like, cool, I got it. Teach somebody, have the awkward moment, have the awkward conversation. Thank you. But do it. Go back, babes, okay. Collins, I mean, just brilliance. But to maintain their power, dominant groups create and maintain a popular system of common sense ideas that support their right to rule. In the United States, hegemonic ideologies concerning race, class, gender, sexuality, and nation are often so pervasive that it's difficult to conceptualize alternatives to them, let alone ways of resisting the social practices that they justify. And like right there, we're tired, so we're like, what? So, right, we normalize things, what we call normal, right? And it's not normal. It just happens to fall into like a perfect white, waspy culture paradigm. Hammond talks about this, it's great. Hammond talks about this. So a direct directive versus an indirect directive. Okay, we've been here before, it's gonna be great. You ready for it? Lauren, we coming in all the time. Lauren, would you like to stop sharpening your pencil?
No.
Go to the principal's office now, it's so disrespectful. Direct directive versus indirect directive. This is cultural, it's deep culture. See how I'm circling back and going through it on the ride? Go ahead. So, I gave an indirect directive to Lauren. I asked her if she wanted to start sharpening her pencil. First of all, who cannot stand it when they're sharpening a pencil and talking? So we talk about that's part of the norm. So I was like, I need you to not sharpen your pencil when you talk. Handle that? Or you can be like, yeah, as he does, I need to sharpen it. Pause. Give me the time to pause. Don't sharpen it. That's the thing. Okay. And that would be like Lauren. Now, Lauren, if I told you that as a teacher, what would be your natural response? Like as just a student, you and your lived experience. Would you have stopped? What would your natural answer be?
Sure.
Why do you think that is?
Because I
Okay. What was her answer? I'm sorry. She says because she obeys authority. Okay. All right. Now hear me out. You sharpen your pencil, and I ask you, would you like to stop sharpening your pencil? What would your answer be? No. How were you spoken to at home? Was it like, would you like to come to dinner, or come sit down and eat?
Come sit down and eat.
Everyone feeling the cultural difference right now? Exists in many other homes and many other culturas, yeah? Not all of them are mine to speak about, but there's a difference when your mom literally tells you to go sit down and your parent tells you to sit down, right? Many of you also have grown up in ethnic groups but I think are often more like definitive or defined, at least in my experience, versus being on the West Coast versus being in Chicago and New York. Like people who are like, I'm Lithuanian, right? I am Irish, right? Like your homes are run differently. Remembering the old country is a different thing, right? Like I have friends who are like, no, I'm Polak, bro. Like, I'm like, what's that? You know, but like they talk about the difference in their homes, right? How they were spoken to, how you respect your elders. All that remembers that deep culture piece, right? That we're coming into. So we have to think about when we're in the classroom to use the direct directive, right? Because if you give me a choice, so what happens is Kevin gives this example, right? And it's a black boy, and he's asking if he wants to stop sharpening his pencil. And he's like, no. And he gets in trouble. And he doesn't know why he's in trouble. Because you asked him a question. If you would have said, please stop sharpening your pencil, he would have been like, oh, he would have sat down. It's the same way we can just give eyes across the room, and it's like, apparently, like, talk right back. My father can still look at me that way. I'm almost 40 years old. And it happened at Christmas. I was like, I'm going to get another. He said, I'm going to go sit down and get the work. Okay. So the direct directive and how important that is, right? Because otherwise, like, you just failed before the game, right? Like, you can just literally, like, the trick test, that's like the ERB or like the ACT question where it's all the A, B, C, and it's like maybe it's D, all of the above. Like, do that, just be direct. Help them. Such an easy piece, and that's deep culture, okay? And Hammond talks about the fact that this is part of WASP culture, right? Because all of us knew the answer, right? All of us knew the known answer. They said, would you like to stop sharpening your pencil? And you're like, I'm gonna go sit down. So that's because we've been and have had white teachers. And white culture, like WASP culture as it's often called, that tells us that those indirect directives happen. I was so confused when I went over to my friend's house and I was like, is it an option, is it not an option, you're doing it, you're not doing it. When I was over at white people, I was like my other friends, that wasn't a situation, I just did not understand. So it's very different. Okay, cool. Intersectionality is often used wrong. I would highly suggest, I don't know if you go to my website, I have my article links there where I wrote about it with Dr. Gloria Wilson, and we kind of take apart intersectionality. Everyone's like, oh, it's all connected. It's not. Yes, and it's about black women. Well, black people, it's specific. It's not general. Everybody wants to be a part of everything. Sometimes you're just not. Sometimes it's just not for you. Okay. All right. It's not enough to know that other women, for example, have different experiences exist. You must also understand that they have their own feminism formed by that experience. So this is me right now talking to my white female educators in the room. You are the majority inside the spaces. I actually choose almost never to go to NAEA, or when I go, I step in instead of immediately out of that space. I'm like, because I don't feel welcome. No one says hi to me. You can see the crews, the cliques. They're straight up gangs. Come on, people, you see that. And you're like, it's like middle school all over again. I'm like, I'll just go over here. Where are the brown teachers? Hi. That's what I'm trying to be, right? I'm trying to find people who are younger teachers, right? Or where is that, right? And then I'm confused when I see fairy houses, and I'm like, what does that have to do with teaching? Anyway, no, I like fairies. That's fine. Okay, so our experience is different in those spaces, right? How we teach is going to be inherently different. Not just due to our race, due to our deep culture. That makes sense? All of those things that we just talked about. Is everyone feeling me on cultural responsiveness now? Makes sense, right? All right. Cool. There's also something called third space feminism, or mujerista feminism, or Chicana feminism. Okay, so this is another part when we talk about living different lives, right? And that looks different. For black women, it looks one way. For brown women, I would say it looks different. For women who are immigrants inside of an experience, okay? So Ansel Dua talks about the borderlands, right? And this idea that I speak two different languages. I'm part of this place, I'm part of that place. And so I'm not part of either place, right? I'm from otro costado, I'm from both sides, right? I'm separated. There's different lands that I have to access and move through. And she unapologetically writes half the time in Spanish and then back in English to force you to deal with it, right? if you haven't encouraged your students to write in whatever language they feel comfortable in their sketchbooks, please do. Title it whatever you want to title it. Put the translation on the side. It's their work, it's not for you. Right? Who's consuming it? They're making it, right? I have this a lot, especially with some of my students. Right now I have a really large population of Japanese American and Korean American students in 2 of my painting classes, okay? And I was like, oh, okay, talk to me. And they mentioned all these artists, and they're like, do you know them? And that was the moment of like, are you for real, teach, right? Like, are you gonna actually be real with me? And I was like, I only know 2 of these people. I don't know the rest of them, and I don't know how to say their names. Can you please teach me their names, and can you give me all of their websites? I want to learn from you. Thank you so much. That was missing in my education. That's doing better the next day. That's owning your mistakes or the things you don't know. Because how can I possibly know everything? I always tell them too. I was like, a wise person knows they don't know everything. Be cautious of those who act like they know everything. Like, just like, don't want none of that. That's bad juju. Okay, so borderlands theory. Wherever 2 or more cultures edge each other, where people of different races occupy the same territory, where lower, middle, and upper class touches, where the space between 2 individuals shrinks with intimacy. Borders are not restricted to territoriality, but rather they respond to the discourse of Western imperialism, which in Spanish American context originated with colonization. Mestiza consciousness combats the concept of master language because borderlands is also between languages. Okay. So this is when we talk about how we use language in so many different formats. Some people like stop saying those words or stop talking that way, right? So often to students, like, first figure out what they're saying, stop making assumptions, right? And they have a right to speak in both voices. Because that's also then a denial of who they are and their deep culture, which totally goes against then culturally responsive teaching. So then like, what do you mean? Okay. And we also have something about differential consciousness, okay? So she identifies 5 general oppositional states, and she's talking about how we move in these spaces. Okay? And I always like to share what informs my learning, even if I don't like overshare. So just like someone who is important to me as an ancestor to my life. And think about it if we thought about it that way, instead of like, you know, those people or the smart people or like the prominent writers and your ancestors, your foremothers. It's a totally different bond to understanding how pedagogy becomes praxis. I'm about praxis. Like, it's so great that people can like pontificate and whatnot. Like, what does it look like in real life in your classroom? It's the most annoying, obnoxious stuff. I'm like, that's so cool, that's so interesting. Like, how do you actually live that? So that's why I show real things. I'm gonna move through so I can be thoughtful. Let's get to Stacy. How am I on time?
We started a little late and we're at the
Oh, okay, right, I got it. Great, thank you. Art education has been predicated on master narratives that perpetuate the subjugation of marginalized cultures in favor of dominant cultural norms. The lack of representation of Black women in the history of art education reflects the fact that these narratives of people of color are fixed to support these master narratives. Subject versus object, who is telling the story, makes a really big difference. Another fun way to start off your classes, like with community norms, you just can't like talk at them all the time, right? Because you want them to talk. Something I really like to do, I said, name all the artists that you know. Tell me important artists, go. And we write them all on the board. So, I don't have a board, but let's do it. Everybody name artists that you know. Don't try and like overdo it, just like think. Like artists that are really important.
Usually Tamar.
Karen.
Where do you come in?
Sarah Z.
Art Carter.
My wife.
Is she there? Is wifey here? Yeah, okay, wifey's here. Okay, and then like if I say like Picasso, Mondrian, who's often being taught? Who are you told to teach?
I was gonna say Amy Sherrill is.
Yeah, okay, sure, all right. So now we're talking about contemporary artists. But so often our elementaries, I bet on it actually. I like use it as my gravitas to move forward to teach them what I'm like my purpose of being their teacher. That's how I start. Like name them. So it's like Picasso. I'll get a Kahlo every now and then. Like a Kahlo will come out. Yaya Kusama came up once, like a few. And I'm like, okay. And then I'll go up to a kid, I'm like, circle everything that's the same. Start circling all the names, all the old dead white guys, okay? I'm like, okay. And I said, and I go to the next kid, I said, erase everything that's circled. Erase it. And it'll be like 2 names. I'm like, erase everybody who's dead. We gave me that 1 name. I was like, this is my purpose as your art teacher, to teach you people who are actively making art now. I was like, because what do you notice? They're like, we only know dead people. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, there's alive people making art. I'm like, I know. And they're like, wait, why? And I was like, what part of the world do you only know about? And they're like, Europe. I'm like, And I was like, did you know that all the colors and the pigments that we use for paint are actually not even from Europe? They're a result of colonization. Like, thank you, the ancestral Americas, for carmine red. My oil painters, like, that's where it comes from. It's called that. Same thing with Indian yellow, as I'm from India. Like, thank you, cows, I'm from India. And so we start rewriting the history of painting by honoring the land. It's really fun. And I'm sitting there, like, see you guys see how I had like huss, and I was like, yes, I think it's cool, right? Like, that's my teacher self right now. My kids are like, oh, okay, cool, writing down like earth pigments, plant pigments, animal pigments. And I'm like, this is revolutionary! And they're just like, okay, Missy, like, writing. Are we gonna need to know this for a test? I wrote it in my sketchbook, and I'm like, no, but you guys, how cool that was. Like, I was my mom practicing, you know? Like, I was doing the thing. They go, anyways, it was a person. Okay. So, all this still connects into feminism as I like to see it, because it's Black feminism, which is like, if we're not taking care of the environment, if we're not taking care of the community and collective care, then we're actually not doing feminism, right? So, how does your feminism fit into your philosophies of education and praxis? It goes for everybody. Everyone can be a feminist if you're just believing that that means like actual equity, right? All these things connect to how we teach. This comes back to then deep culture, because depending on how your home was and how you were raised, you have a different concept of gender norms and how you perceive women. Cool. Cool. Intention is irrelevant, as it does not lighten the blow of the subordination of Black and brown voices. Dr. Aiko. If you haven't gotten her book yet on, what is it? Is it Race and Art?
Race and Art Education.
Race and Art Education, like, you need that in your life. I promise you. It'll be a good book and a good learning experience.
Was that Race and
Art Education? It's by her and Dr. Craig. Ready? I always say Craigie too, but I don't actually know. Yeah, I know it's Aiko. So these are the things that started forming me. When I think about third space feminism and how it looks in my art classroom, these are the questions I started asking myself, and what I want you to ask yourself. Where are you providing opportunities for your students to confront their own borderlands? That can happen in any medium, but what can that look like, right? That can happen inside of photography, right? That can happen inside of ceramics. It can happen in literally any art form. How do you make space for and affirm students processing and creating in other languages? They're going to assume, because of master narratives, because of the way that we've been indoctrinated into white supremacist culture and the heteropatriarchy, like the way institutions function that we teach in English, that that's what they're supposed to write in. That's how they're supposed to think. That's how they're supposed to access things, right? It's something I'm curious about, because I don't know, because like, I mean, I dabble in higher ed, but like, I don't. It's like, if they read a bit of Borderlands by Ansel Dua, would you get really beautiful pieces back from your international students or your multilingual students on how they think about and write about our education? I think it would be different, because the voice is different, right? My mother, and anybody who has people who like have families that speak in another language, hands up. Families that speak in another language, okay. I don't know about you, but like for me, my mother sounds different when she's speaking Spanish than when she's speaking in English. It sounds completely different. Yeah. Like there's a warmth in her voice because it's her first language, and there's like a beat of blood when she speaks. It's the difference of like Flavia versus like Flavia. Flavia. You know, Flavia Sophia sounds so much better. Okay, how is my art making impacting the community outside of your classroom? Right? This is when we're thinking about the community literally or physically in, right? And then the community on all the levels, right? So like community, like literally like geographically my community, right? And then we're thinking about like the larger community. We're thinking about me and the earth as my community. Yes, all of those things are important. And when does art making center like the love of self and empowerment? Or it's just about them. It's not about another artist. Think about it. If everyone's just sitting there telling you about other artists, are you really feeling important?
I have a question about, if you can explain a little bit more about what borderlands, is that being between two cultures?
It means between two cultures and two languages.
And two languages.
Both and, yeah. So it's the idea of not of one place and not of the other, right? Often
But you have to navigate through both.
And how to navigate through both, and I also don't belong to both. It's often the violence that first-time college goers experience in so many different ways, right? Because you come home and you're like now trying to understand what happened to you. Hooks talks about this, right? And you have people who are telling you that your Black Southern culture doesn't matter, but then that's who made you who you are, right? And just because people are not formally educated, that means there was no education in your life. And y'all know that's a lot, right? How many aunties, uncles, tias, tios, like et cetera, taught you? There's teachings in there, regardless if they went to and had formal education, right?
I find that even Black and white children have had the same issue. Not necessarily two different languages, but coming from, being half Black, half white, they also come up on the same challenges of not being Black enough and not being white enough, but still having to navigate.
Yeah, I think that's something that's real. I identify being Afro-Latina and biracial, but I think it's different because it's Mexican and Black versus if it was like, does that make sense, like a more dominant culture inside of my pairing, it would be a different experience, which I don't know. But specifically Borderlands is talking about being of two, like from the outside and the inside, like from the United States and outside of it. Like the concept of foreign or other in that true sense of international.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I know that just like in my own life, an example that I'm thinking of is just like my Nana, her parents immigrated here from Slovakia.
Yeah.
And she married into a family that one side of it was mostly Pennsylvania Dutch, had immigrated here for years, and they loved. Some of the family members had a hard time accepting her because she was a new immigrant when she got married, and it was like, okay, well, so my grandpa married someone who's been here for generations rather than marry someone who's just getting established with their family. And I know she grew up like speaking Slovak, and then she had to lose that in order to fit in with her family she married into. And so I think that this, like growing up, I would hear her talk and we were very close. And so I feel like for me, it helped me understand, and I have a lot of empathy for those dynamics.
Yeah.
And that understanding just culturally, like not fully grasping it, and wishing that I could have learned Slovak from her, but she had lost it herself by the time she was in her late 70s and 80s because she just couldn't really use it anymore.
Well, that's where intergenerational healing is going to come through. You're going to heal that trauma that happened. That was like forced, right? Like white supremacy in general, the idea of whiteness is, right, like a concept, like it's a construct, right? And so violence is put upon, like there's violence against people who are now oppressors, right? And that's the whole thing that Host talks about. Like you have to undo our personal oppressions that we've experienced, right? And understanding that even as an oppressor, right? For you to go back. It's like when people tell you, they're like, oh my gosh, I just finally went to need the blank Prague or wherever and you have this moment, right? Language was stolen from you, culture was stolen from you to assimilate, to then gain dominance for survival. It's ugly, it's not pretty, but there's a beauty to be able to go back and reclaim that. And I think it's a beautiful opportunity where I think a lot of the time it provides white people at least independent access to what Black people experience. Right? You're like, I'm doing like years of it, right? Like I don't even know. Like I look at a continent, I'm like maybe down there somewhere on the bottom. Like we can't go that far back, right? Like I don't know.
Like I know, right? And I mean, Slovak goes back to like slave, Slav.
Yeah, there's like a whole world there to uncover. Yeah, exactly. But I think that's correct in terms of how you're connecting that to your personal experience. And then I think reading that might have, like, it's going to be different for everyone, right? It's what we're reading to your identity, and that's an important part of what we're reading to digest. Does anyone else have any questions? I'm like a question person. All right. Okay, now Black feminism living and breathing in my art classroom. Community over everything. Nurturing and centering community learning and healing. So that means, like, if someone else is doing it great, comparison is the thief of joy. Don't, like, ruin that, like, learn from it, right? Like, how did you do that? Have you been taking classes outside of school? Like, learn from each other. We're resources to one another, right? That's when people are like, women supporting women. Like, yes, like, tell me I look nice. You look nice. Thank you. Like, it doesn't, move on. All right, centering knowledge construction comes from multiple sources: oral, written, experiential, performative, and spiritual. Hooks talks about this in this book called Homegrown. It's probably my favorite book. It's deeply personal, but Homegrown, it's with Amelia Mesa Vines and Bell Hooks. It's called Homegrown, okay? And the reason why I love this book so much is that it's literally two art educators, one who's Chicana and one who's Black, talking about our education the whole time and how they grew up deeply. I'm just like, ah! Like, it was a moment I needed in my life, especially as an art educator. And so what I mean to say with that is that they talk about their first experiences with art and how often people assume that young children who are Black and brown have never seen art before. And they start with often a big usual example, like often they've seen it inside of church, inside of a spiritual place, or at home. It's the it's a reproduction. Like, they've seen something. They have context. Or they're seeing something, depending on the intentionality of that house home and the culture there, right? That is specific. That's like, I saw images of Black Santa when I grew up. Like, Santa was like white Santa. I was like, oh, we all got white Santa. Like, that's interesting, right? Like that's neat. And you have to think about that. Like, some man magically appears who, like, looks nothing like your cultural group and shows up in your home, like, but he leaves you gifts. Right? Or those who don't have it, right? Like, I live in Los Angeles and I work with a very predominant Jew, like I have a large Jewish population. Like, I get tomorrow off. That's why I can travel back to see my children. But the same idea, right, is like when we're thinking about like the context, right? They have context. Did you bother to ask them before you wanted to start banking that, like, I know things and show off all your stuffy stuff? And Hooks talks about the need for our own validation as teacher. And we need it, but like how you get it, you gotta be mindful, right? Because otherwise it's about you. And then you just straight up narcissistic all the time up in class, making portraits and paintings about you. Where the professors are like, read my work. And you're like, the whole time we're reading this person's work, like, there's no one else but you. Who wrote on this topic? Like, please. Okay, valuing creativity and imagination is fruitful for dialogue and action. Art making is advocacy for empowerment, self-care, and meditation. Yeah? I tell them, if anything, I want you to walk away with knowing that sketchbook is a place where you can put it all down and feel better. Like, vomit up in there, if that's what you need to do. Like, that's your best. Like, get wild in it. Like, do it. Is that what your sketchbook is? I'm like, yeah, that's how everybody sees it. Personally. Actively seeking, practicing, conjuring social justice through arts within curriculum and outside of the classroom. So that's me wanting to, like, us making, let's say, the environmental artworks, right? It was collaborative work, we did that together, and then we're gonna take it to the next step. And I got pretty cool kids, granted they're prep school kids, but they were like, oh, you know what we should do? Like, we should use this art to, like, do something. That's so cool. Like, we should, like, do prints or something, and then, like, raise money and give it to an organization. There you go. They can do it. They're so capable. They're so smart. Amazing. Alrighty. This is the books I was talking about, Homegrown. And if you have not read Art on My Mind by Bell Hooks, that's what you need to pick up right now in your life and start reading. Like, that's the first one. Okay. And why is because, I mean, think about, especially for you as an art educator, when you're learning about other artists, who's the voice who's talking to you about those artists? It's a very different take right? To have someone from a different cultural group do that. What can't you see? This one? This is ceremony of spirit.
Ceremony, okay.
Ceremony, yeah. Ceremony of spirit. This one's homegrown, and this one's art on my mind, visual politics. And especially for those of you who, like, I mean, just real talk, like my global majority people, you're gonna have these moments where you're like, oh, I'm crazy. And you're like, oh, I want to see something. Very fun. Yes, love you. I'm angry I had to find that on my own and not in any of the programs that I was in. Don't do that to them. My kids already know who bell hooks is. I just have quotes on the wall. Remember the passive? There's the passive ways that are helpful, like the indirect. The indirect in my classroom is what they see around them. We're talking about environment, right? That's why I was talking about environment. That's the music that they hear, right, in class, which is their music too. I mean, no F-bombs, but like they hear their music, they get very excited, right? And then what they see around them, right? Because, you know, like you can remember it, like the posters that you see in your classroom when you play back to them. Art class, so hooks. Art class was the one place in high school where I felt liberated from the drive to be a perfect black student. Always smart and uplifting my race. In art class, I could be whatever I wanted to be. Something to think about. What were art classes like for you growing up? Did they liberate you? Is that where you felt the most free? And is that where your students feel the most free? Or if that's a point of trauma, can you undo that? Because that's your work. That's your intergenerational communal work. I don't know if I'm reading that. Oh, this is what I was talking about in terms of seeing different images, yes? So the role of family and home, they talk about this in Homegrown, okay? I've written about this. For many African-American working class people, the first art we encounter is religious iconography. In my childhood, what I saw were the cheap reproductions of Leonardo and Michelangelo from Ninja Turtles, okay? And then this is Mesa Vines. My family life was totally shaped by Catholicism, a hybrid of Mexican and US Catholicism, as it included Irish priests from Ireland. There was this strange kind of mix of oratory and liturgy and beauty, but it was certainly fundamentalist. Catholicism belonged to the altar boys. There are altar girls now, but not them. So the fact that women maintained home altars or yard shrines posed alternatives to the conventional norm. Example of deep culture? No. Okay. I'd like to come back to this. What was the first art you remember seeing before school? What was in your home? When was it? Outside, was it inside? Anybody got one? What's a nice memory? Yeah. Art by your mother in your house? I love that. Anybody else art by your family members or parents? Beautiful. How personal is that? Anybody else? Yes.
Well, it was famous on the Cosby Show, the funeral.
Yeah.
My house and all the other houses of black people had that same piece of artwork. And it was kind of like a cultural connectivity point that everyone had. The funeral procession.
That's beautiful. That's a paper, by the way.
That's a paper.
That's a paper. Just say that's fine. Yeah, like you're gonna have to find the name and do the whole thing. I was like, that's like a research. Yeah, not gonna do that to you in PhD, but like, you know what I mean? Like it's a rabbit hole. Right. Okay, so some of my current answers to these questions is I asked my school, which is very much so like the buildings cannot be messed with, like everything is beige, like the way things have to be at a college or prep school. I was like, can I have a communal wall? What are the kids gonna put up? What if there's backgrounds? What if they draw, you know, body parts? What if we like trusted them to be people? Anyway. So then I asked, I said, well, like, can I have something that like moves in and out? Like I can take it away and set it up. So it took 5 white men to clear me having my wall. But I did it. And that's why my privilege, because my father's been a head of school, so he told me exactly the way to get what exactly I wanted. It was like, hey, this is what you're going to do. And I was like, proposal. Notes, doable, and a department chair was like, do it, I support you. So student voice, mental health, collaborating, art outside of the building, interdepartmental collaboration. I'm a former dancer, so I'm also just happen to be really good friends with the dance teacher at our school. So that's a way to connect. Centering the land and water and earth as themes to honor with our indigenous siblings, right? And I do that with drawing and painting, talking about where things come from, right? The origin of things. And conversations and prompts, right? Self-care, self-knowledge. I'll give them quotes from Audre Lorde. I'll give them quotes from Gloria and Anzaldúa. Like I'm popping those things in. It doesn't matter if they remember it all, but if there's that moment of connection, right, and that it leads to a larger concept or idea for them, that's meaningful. Alrighty, cite who you learn from. That means me too. This work is not prescriptive. I do not dream of labor. I do dream of collaborators and supporting students. And I do dream of a position in higher ed one day. Reach out if you ever want me to come guest lecture or spend time with your class. You can always email me. I take time to respond because, I don't know, I'm a full-time teacher and a mom. And then you can always find me on Instagram. I'm actually pretty active on there. So you can find a lot of what I'm talking about, a lot of my lessons, and a lot of other things that I do. So I'm just going to let that kick it there. So if maybe any questions or things like that, I'm happy to chill and talk.
What are the dates for adding voices next year? Thank you.
So I'm the founder of Adding Voices. It's the only conference that centers social justice and anti-racist artwork for art professionals. It is November 8th through the 10th, and it's going to be at Moore College of Art and Design, so I would love to see you there. It's free for students, and it's all about accessibility. So talking about that is breaking down the problems that exist, in my opinion, within conference structures. So that means it's exploitive, right? And it takes from you too much. So what is it? It's like $45 to come?
It's $25 for the global majority, $50 for LUAG white allies, and we pay everyone who speaks in this conference.
And that's Laura Teacher, if you don't know her, from Moore College of Art and Design, so that's my co-conspirator. That's how I know Stacy. That's wonderful. Yeah, this work has been fantastic. So everybody who speaks at Adding Voices is of the global majority or black or brown. That's what the space is there for learning. We feed you there. All presenters are paid. And it's beautiful. Yeah, and then you can go to our website to see all the rest of that. Dr. Acuff was the first speaker, so I started Adding Voices in June 4th, 2020. It was online. My daughter was a month old, but I started before that thinking the world was just upsetting me, and I was really hurt. It was 2020 and the world was on fire. I was bringing another human life into the world, so I was just very vexed. I was like, what do I do? And my friends were like, do that thing you've been talking about doing. My really good friend, Jen. And I was like, what? She's like, a conference idea. And I was like, all right, bet. So I started looking at people, and the first Adding Voices conference was fully, I'd say diverse as it included. It was important to include white art educators in that conversation about race, about social justice, and the violence that we were experiencing. And so I think 20 people signed up, and it was free. And then George Floyd was murdered, and then 500 people or something like that signed up. And it was an asynchronous conference, and Dr. Acuff was the keynote for that first conference. It was just exceptional. I was like, hey, I have this idea. Would you be interested? I have no money. Most of the people are down for the work, right? And that was a beautiful moment of supporting me. A black female educator was supporting me that I never had in terms of my own teachers, so that was gorgeous. And so it keeps living and breathing. I think that's it. This is other artwork I've made with my students, I guess. Oh, Botero just passed away, that's relevant, cool. So we talked about body image and the politics of size and being body positive. And so aluminum foil, what else? And rigid wrap. And so they chose animals to make nice and plump. I think now I try and do bodies to see how they feel about it. And then Arturo Herrera, we talked about identity. So kids experiencing the identity wheel of gender for the first time, of identity of fully, and then asking them to kind of pick things inside of that, and then deconstructing Disney. It was so fun. So we had rad Mulans and things like that. I think that's it for my slides. Thank you, everybody.
Can we give Flavia another round of applause? Heather and Amy, thank you so much. I'm Latoya. Thank you again for staying a little extra time, for participating today, for our presenters for coming all the way across the coast to be with us. What an inspiring day, both as a reflective practice for us as teachers, but also what we're going to give to our students. I'm so grateful for this. I know I learned a lot, and I still have a lot to learn. And also, I wanted to mention that Flavia is also teaching a follow-up session on October 18th over Zoom. That's part of this grant that we received from the National Endowment for the Arts. That's also free. So October 18th, 6 to 8 p.m.
Yes.
And that is centering Black and Brown narratives and art history. Hoping to include some of the amazing artists that we have in our collection here at the art galleries. Over 20,000 works that we currently have, only 5% are on view. An amazing resource. We have tons of things on our website. We'll be following up with you with lots of resources from our presenters today, and we're going to continue this work together, so we hope to see lots of you here. We have tons of things coming up, so please take advantage of that. Also wanted to mention that our partners who are here from Pennsylvania Arts and Education Association are hosting a conference next weekend, right? In Erie, Pennsylvania. So please, following weekend.
October 6th, 7th, 8th.
Okay, sorry, October 6th, 7th, and 8th. I'm losing track of time. But please take advantage of all these wonderful opportunities. I'll also share all of your contact information. I hope this was an opportunity for you to connect with each other and to keep in communication. So thank you again for being here. Please take lots of materials. We have past exhibition catalogs upstairs. We also have Lucy Gans, the exhibition that's upstairs. We have her catalog for the taking. And please join us for everything else that's coming up. So thank you so much. And thank you again. Oh, one more, sorry, I forgot. An important conference, November 4th, Access Culture Symposium. So if you're interested in learning techniques for incorporating inclusive practice, accessible practice into your work as administrators, as artists, as teachers and educators, this is a convening that will be over the course of 3 years. It kicks off on November 4th, and all of that is on our website. So, like I said, no lack of opportunities. Hope to see you at all of these events. Thank you.